I'm just going to share a little something so you have something to see, to visualize this with. Okay. We have a little guide here as to what we are going to speak about. Um, so just to start, just to let you guys, can you guys see the share? Yes? Yeah, and feel free to
Yep.
put things in the chat because all that will be active. You can throw in questions if you're unable to participate with Mike, but oh great, the pointer has gone nuts. That's okay. All right. So as you obviously can see, we will be discussing speech leading into accent work. But we are not coming off things that are so foreign, okay? The goal here is to take what you already know and introduce ways so that you can work on things that you need to work on with a functional process that's usable for each thing that you need. Because just to align where Gisela and I thought this could really work is because so primarily here at home in the Philippines, pegs are a thing, right? And that's just how things work until it evolves again. Just like everything, the arts keeps moving forward. Um, you either roll along or you kind of just get left in the dust, and then everything just becomes kind of stock, meaning the same, adding to the pool that's the majority rather than standing out and moving forward towards whatever is new or whatever is the most active. I'm not going to use the word trending because trending connotes the fact that once it's gone untrending, it's unusable. That's not true. The contrast with this approach that we're doing is that in the media that we consume here in the Philippines, right? We are moved by a lot of international media, right? Can we all agree on that one? We all have smart devices. We all have a subscription, right, to one thing or other. So just by that, right? Just think about it. If in local terms, the masses consume a lot of internet media, what more the ones who have multiple subscriptions? And think of the things that move you. Where do they come from? Okay. Think of the things that inspire you to do what you're doing now in terms of the voice, how it's being used, the creativity that's coming in, the inspiration. Those channels are where your, I'm going to call it instrument, okay, because it's an instrument and with a mechanism, right? Our voice is part of our bodies, right? It's inside our bodies. So therefore there is a biology connected to it that is inescapable, okay? But there are concepts in working with the voice, sometimes teaching, that because you cannot take the vocal instrument, hold it in your hand like a piano, a trumpet, or a string instrument, and be that exact with it. A lot of it is a felt situation. You have to end up really feeling your voice. Yes, our ears give us the information, right? But our ears only let us go as far as mimic if we don't understand, we're not having a full understanding of how does this heard information translate into something that I can use with my instrument. So that's what we're going to try to do here. And we're going to approach that by way of accent and the speaking as a mechanism. All right. Because once you understand it as a mechanism, using it as an art form really falls into your creativity, your inspiration. The possibilities are endless. Okay, so that's how we thought to bring those two worlds, you know, thoughts of approach together, so that it doesn't feel like, oh, you have to undo everything you've learned. That's not true, you know. Things just kind of get readapted, reshaped, realigned, because just so just because are we all here, we've all done some form of voice work, right? Singing included, right? Speaking, singing, good, wonderful. Um, so I'm going to say a statement that might cause your brain to just go into neutral or a hard reverse. It's okay. Let it. You have to, you have to let yourself feel those things, because okay, this is a point of understanding for me. And there is no judgment on that, because it is not a matter of right or wrong. Everybody's voice here is just as individual as the shirts and tops you decided to put on this morning. Okay? It's really just that individual. So in terms of is there a right or a wrong, I don't approach it that way. It's either a healthy and sustainable, or the opposite. And I don't have a descriptor for the opposite, because somebody's physical feedback might be different from somebody else's. Yes, there might be general feedback that crosses over everything. Like, everybody here's felt some kind of tightness in our throats while working, while speaking, sick, or you just wake up and you're like, it's not doesn't feel right. We've all felt that, right? Right? That feeling of tightness can mean multiple things. So it's very important how our brain understands the information we hear, so that we don't do anything that can further increase discomfort, further increase um, vocal challenges, because we all know once our voices start going against us, it becomes mental. Oh, why is it like this? I have all this to read, or I have all this to do. I have a rehearsal to get into. I have a track to lay down. You know, there's a lot connected to our voice, right? So I'm preempting what I'm about to say with all of this, so that um, you're not going to feel like you have to undo so much. It's a matter of just adding and letting that realign. And what I'm going to say is that outside of the national locale, and I say that in a very general sense, outside of the Philippines, outside of Southeast Asia, right? What happened over the pandemic, where all of a sudden there's this boom of voiceover, right? It was a boom. It's like all of a sudden now it's like this monetizable thing, right? In terms of economics. What happened was something that we can all agree happened out of need, right? People needed to work, people needed to make money, right? We agree on that, yeah? Okay, because no one could go out for a good almost 2 full years. No one could go out, right? Thankfully, we've transitioned to where we are now, where we can, right? Maintaining um, proper measures of safety, of course. Uh, I'm going to generally say the West, because that also includes Europe. It's not just the United States. Europe, Canada, they have their own. I mean, how many Canadian series have we seen on Netflix alone? Just that one platform, right? How the arts is approached is on the basis of training, meaning, as a high school student going into college, you can directly study the arts, and with specificity, not just theater arts, right? If you study theater arts in the West, especially in the US, right? Let's take my locale. I'm from New York, right? Center of a lot of things. It was a port of entry during the immigration era, Titanic. That's how that's how many people have been transiting through New York and even before that, right? All of that creates this whole melting pot that feeds, the arts industry. Yep, Lady Liberty, Ellis Island. When when all of that became a thing, meaning past the era of the Gershwin brothers, right? Lerner and Lowe, all of those what we call jazz classics are really musical theater pieces. Um, they after that era, right? The modern in the modern society, this whole structure of training, as I said, really happens when you enter college and with specificity, like I said. Um, you can study voice two ways if you're approaching it the way we're coming from it here. A lot of us have done voice work, yeah, if not all of us. The way it happens is you can either go into mass communications because you'll get the same training going that route, or you can go straight into the arts, you know. And um, a lot of people who go through mass comm will come back again and study voice through the arts curriculum because through there, um, it's similar with mass comm when it comes to all of the entry classes. You have your speech class, which lasts actually not just one semester, it's the minimum of 2 years. So your second year and your first year and second year. And depending on what you study, what your program is, you study it all the way through until you get your master's or your doctorate. There's an element of speech that's always there, right? Um, if you study it through mass comm, it's exactly how you imagine it. It's a lot of radio work. It's a lot of now digital media, of course, all of that. You learn your sound production because that's the specificity that it needs. And then you can concentrate, right? Once you're in that major, you can concentrate. With the arts, you have your acting 101 and straight through, and that doesn't stop. It's not one semester, it's all the way through, right? Your speech is all the way through that. And I'm preempting what I was going to say with this as a second point of idea, because back home, and once everybody started working, the specifically voiceover people who went on the internet, they learned that now they want to find job. It was harder on them when the entertainment industry reopened again, because the reality, where your media comes from, Netflix, Hulu, Disney, etc., whatever it is, if it comes from the West, you're getting an actor. You're not getting a voice actor, you're getting an actor, standard actor, if you want to use something more grounded. And the reason for that is because you don't have to tell them or prompt them to get into the circumstance of what they're reading, because that's what they were trained to do. Think of all of the acting classes and workshops you attended during the lockdown. How many times have you heard a version of the phrase imaginary circumstance, a story, you know, the source of the material, the background of the material, right? And that starts to really create the difference, right? Now, this is not a knock on people who went on the internet to study voice work. No, no, no. It's just bridging you what actually happens on the outside. It's difficult. It's very difficult for voice work. If you feel it's difficult here, it's difficult everywhere. And the reason why is because um, it costs money. It costs less money to hire somebody who's fully trained than it is to, um, yes, truthfully, that's very Meisner of you, Louis. Very Meisner, you know,
It's one of my favorite quotes.
right? Right? Because it feeds your work. Phrases like that feed your work. Um, and again, a lot of this hinges on economics. It's like 60% economics and then 40% everything else. Because remember, productions have a budget, right? If they have to hire somebody to help you through your material, then they've hired you, they've hired that person, they're hiring the techs in the booth, whoever else, it compounds. But if you hire somebody who's already trained, learned, practiced, they've done it, they have a body of work to fall on, then all you have to do is choose what they do and say, oh, okay, let's go with this direction. It's one person, right? One person. And that quote unquote, oh, it's only cheaper to hire one person is only temporary. Because if they like your talent, if they feel that you can service what they need as an artist, as an actor, right? And you're the right personality, they like working with you, that one little, oh, okay, yeah, it's just me, so yeah, the fee is like, oh, only little because they only need one person. Well, a contract is a lot. It will come back to you when you're trained because a contract is a lot. It's worth a lot. Not only that, it opens up a whole window of opportunity. Now I'm going to bring in the context of here, right, in the local scene. It opens up a window of opportunity for you to work in the global arts community where things are contracted. You now have the opportunity to ask about unionization, because when you start working overseas, those protections are provided for you, for the people who hire you, because they cannot use you if you are not an artist that has protections. It's connected to labor laws outside of the Philippines. And we all know, even in 2023, it kind of looks like our labor laws are still the same labor laws from 1972, you know? But we all know that. We all know that. Unless somebody's joining us from an international culture, we know that, right? Because lived experience, right? Okay. So thank you for giving me a couple of minutes to just preempt this, because I don't want anyone to feel like, oh, I have to unlearn everything and relearn something new. No, no, no. You already have something. Okay, we're just going to keep working on that something so that it's moving, your instrument to somewhere, right? And this is where the limit of pegs happened, right? Um, Example, we all know this rhythm, right? Right? Insert text here, right? And then you see a commercial, a generic commercial for, let's say, an international brand called Pfizer. And then you hear things like, da, 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 pa-da, pa-da, da, da, pa-pa-da. Obviously, the only thing that sounds like a peg was the last section. It's like, the read might have said, you know, lean your life towards us at Pfizer. And then everything above that could be something different, which is the difference in how ads are constructed in the West. You see a life circumstance where the product is actively working, and then the only hook to that product is the last sentence, right? Because a lot of the ads are describing what's happening in, let's say there's a shot, right? It's what's happening in the shot. Why? Because an audience member, the receiver of the information, that's what's pulling on your heartstrings, right? The words Add to that if the words are incongruent with what's happening. Because going back to Luis's share with, imaginary circumstance, we all know technically that what we're seeing on a screen has already been produced, right? It's been worked on, the rehearsals, it's shot, it's playing now, it's a national reel, it's going all over the country. But why don't we see that first? Because they bridge to our hearts. They're trying to compel us to get something, to buy something, to say, oh, if you get, let's say in the Pfizer example, drugs from that company, you know, it'll be better off for you. So, you can't, if you have a peg might not work after a while, depending on the products, because like, what if, the original peg was for, you know, adult support multivitamin, and then the next thing you're going to read is for like, a new feminine product. How are you going to do that? Right? Right. And if they really want to, you're contracted to do this, you're there, your hours are ticking, and they want you to cover, let's say, 8 spots before 2 p.m. You started at 10, right? You know, imagine if this were just a specified voice actor, and then there's like this going back and forth with the booth and the actor. By the time you lay your third one down, it's already 1 o'clock. You still have five more, right? So this is just a quick application. So let me stop here and let me check in with you guys. Any questions, any thoughts, things that ring in your head about this stuff before I go forward? And if anybody, just share right on, you know, and let me um, pull the share back a little bit so that if anybody puts anything in the chat, I can see. You guys can still see the screen with a slide, right? Okay, wonderful. Questions, thoughts, experiences that have from the past that have popped into the head? Anything? No, we're good. We're good. Okay, so if we are, I'm just going to forward to the next one. And like I said, you know, let's bridge it from a very basic point, and that's the biology of things. Yeah. There's a mechanism, and mechanisms need some kind of energy, power, something that keeps it going. It's your support, right? And why do we need that support? Because there's an output, there's a production, right? You hear sound speaking. And it has to be maintained because this is not a one-off. We don't want to just be able to read on Monday and then not be able to use it on Tuesday, right? So all of this is a very visual thing because we cannot take our vocal cords outside of the body. So just so that I have a sense of a general understanding of how we know our mechanism. Does anyone know if your larynx, your voice mechanism, is in front of your body or behind your body? Luis is like, yeah, take a guess. This is not, if you guess the wrong thing, poof, you're at no. Don
In
says front.
front, yeah.
Don says front. Ree says front. Anything else? Anyone else want to take a crack at it? Luis feels like he wants to say front, but he's not sure because he like touched his Adam apple.
Yeah,
Adam's apple.
it
Marcel
feels
says
like
front.
front to me, but
Feels like front to you?
when I have a thing of like forward
Mm.
and backward, if I'm speaking from the larynx, it feels backward, but physically it seems forward.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Thank you for sharing that. Does anybody feel that? Sometimes when you're speaking, it feels like it's somewhere else, right? Okay, good. Okay, all right. So now let's tick that off the box and give you a good, steady, reliable anchor on it. Okay. So in the medical field, which is where Dan started, I was not a performer first. I was a sports medicine major. And um, the internship was great, but then when I saw the pay, I was like, bullcorn. See you later, you know. Anyway, but Dan was young and naive and inexperienced back then. So, okay, your physical planes, right? This is ventral, front, ventral, okay? And though if you forget that word, when I say the word for the back, it will remind you of it. Now, you guys have seen sharks, killer whales, you know, those things. They have, killer whales have those big, tall, black fins, and so do sharks, you know, minus the nurse shark. Um, the what do we call that thing, right? It's a fin, and it's on their back. It's called a dorsal fin.
Dorsal.
Yes, so dorsal fin is always back. Ventral is the front. Your speaking mechanism, your larynx, where your voice box is actually ventral. And you'll know when you touch the back of your neck and you feel bones, because what you are touching are your vertebrae, specifically the cervical section of your vertebrae. Cervical, not cervix. Cervical meaning neck. Okay? So your airway is forward of your spinal column. Okay? But there's two tubes there. You have your trachea, which is where your larynx is in the front, and behind that you have your esophagus. Okay? If you look at, you know, we've seen this in school, that cut of the human torso, right? And it looks like a whole bunch of zigzags that mean nothing, right? Because you can't, it's hard to tell when it's cut unless you are specifically studying medicine and you're accustomed to looking at things that way, right? Our voice boxes, our larynx, okay, the entire thing. That's why Luis goes, Adam's apple. Okay, it's in the front. And for men, women have this too, but it's just not as prominent. Okay, so ladies, if you have um, brothers, uncles, fathers, cousins who are male, who are around you, just, you know, stare at their necks and then just tell them not to move. And then within a second of that, just put your finger right there. And they're like, what are you doing? I'm trying to visualize the voice box. I'm trying to visualize larynx. Those two, when you see, ladies, when, and I'm not talking about, you know, um, I'm not talking about sugi here. I'm just speaking biologically, okay? Biologically. No matter what your orientation is, cis identifying men, you can see these, you know, when you look at their Adam's apple, it looks like there's two sides, right? And then they come together in the middle on that little crest, right? Mine is not as prominent because Dan has a beard and a double chin. Okay, so that crest in the middle is where both sides of your trachea meet, and it protects the cords, right? The structure of the human speaking mechanism is actually closer to a diamond than a circle. Because if you look at, thankfully, Luis, you are a very long-necked, gifted human being. You can see these two muscles on the side and it creates this little divot, right? Those little muscles on the sides are not part of your speaking structure, although you see it move. Those are your sternocleidomastoids. It's a muscle that attaches to three bones. That's why it's, you know, a very long name. Okay, we're only concentrating on right here. Ladies, you're gonna have to feel it because sometimes it's hard to see. That's the front of your trachea. I mean, the front of your larynx. Okay, it protects your vocal cords. Your vocal folds, your false cords, and your true cords are there. in the middle of that. Because contrary to how it feels, they're actually very small, right? Can you imagine how amazing it is that something barely an inch long can produce something so prominent? We can't miss it, you know, right? Your trachea, which is your windpipe, is below that. That connects to your lungs, okay? It slowly branches out into to the bronchus and bronchioles, and then it terminates or ends in these little gray black structures called the alveoli, and that's where gas exchange happens. Okay, oxygen comes in, carbon dioxide. Let's not you guys. I'm going to have to stop down for getting scientific because I'm geeky like that. And I tutored anatomy and physiology for a long time. Okay, so the lungs goes into the lungs, right? Right? Now, the lungs are protected by the ribs, right? The reason why I'm going far into describing the lungs is because our breathing mechanism, even if you're just sitting here breathing, it feels like your body's going like this, right? Normally, every day, you know, you don't think about it. It's an involuntary thing, right? It's directly controlled by your medulla oblongata. You don't have to think to do it, but it's partially controllable. Our normal breathing goes like this, which creates, and this, remember what I mentioned before, the concepts actually are what mar our understanding of how things happen, because depending on how somebody describes something, that's how you hear it. How it's told to us as voice users is how we'll understand things. So it's very important, the information that you hear. That's why I'm starting from biology. This kind of breathing feels like we're only breathing with our lungs and our ribs. Actually, it's not, okay? The reason why it's swelling in and out is because air is constantly going in and we're breathing out, entering and breathing out, right? But the muscle that innervates, that motivates the lungs to suck in air, right? Normally, there's no air in our lungs. That's why we have to keep breathing. We have to constantly replace the air, right? So how do you bring in something when it's already empty? You have to create pressure, right? Sucking in pressure, meaning like that. If I were to exaggerate breathing, you have to suck in the air from the atmosphere, right? Our diaphragms are the muscle that allow our lungs to constantly pull air out of the atmosphere, right? Who here has ever heard of this whole breathe down, like breathe into your stomach or breathe into your things like that? Good. Correct direction, wrong description. Because you're not breathing into your stomach, you're breathing deep into your lungs, that your diaphragm is pushing your liver, your stomach, your gallbladder, and your spleen down towards your intestines. That's why it feels like it's in the stomach. Yeah. And contrary to popular belief, it's not just your rectus abdominis, the first six muscles that you see in a six pack. It's not just your rectus abdominis that goes like this. You know, when you see kids, when they're playing around with their breath, they stick their stomachs out because they don't, you know, it's the natural reaction to, oh, there's no more space, so let's create space. So your muscles do this, right? But what's really happening, just so you understand how your body takes in air, and we'll, you know, we're taught this is mechanism now, mechanism going into support. This is what we're talking about now. See, it's only been 10 minutes, nakadalawa na tayo. Ah, there's the bilingual guy, you know. That movement of the diaphragm is the mechanism, and it becomes the support when we start using the air to speak or sing. Because like whistling, you know, like whistling, you guys know, like who here can whistle? I am not as good. It's hard, diba? And then when you're learning, it's like all of a sudden you're going to turn blue because you keep blowing out, right? That's air pressure coming from our lungs through an open set of vocal cords. Kasi walang sound. There's no sound. right? When we decide that we're speaking, it's the same thing, except your vocal cords now touch, right? And then it's similar to whistling in the sense that the air vibrates through your vocal cords and it creates sound. It's like a kazoo, right? So now align that to everything you've heard so far about voice and the breath. Now we're talking about it from the bottom up as opposed from the top down, because our vocal cords don't vibrate because the air is going in. It's vibrating because there's air in our lungs. It's coming out as sound where we've decided we're going to speak or sing. It's coming out as sound. So it vibrates our vocal cords from the bottom up. And actually, if you guys get a chance to hop on YouTube, you can see an endoscope of people singing from the top, right? You see these white little cords that are doing all sorts of things like lengthening, shortening, vibrating, shaking like this, right? That's only the top of your vocal cords. Your vocal cords actually are a sheath. Okay, they hang down, right? The top is over here and then they hang down because that's how you create sound and sound variation. People with bigger voices have a larger chord mechanism. People with small voices tend to have smaller, right? In terms of sound and pitch. Okay, now we're starting to get into production, right? We're talking now how the air turns into sound, right? The breath pressure collected in our lungs when our brains decide I need to speak or sing or use my voice, it's involuntary. It's so seamless we don't even think about it. That's how amazing the human brain is and the anatomy. That all we need to do is decide. The air goes through, it vibrates the vocal cords, and then sound. If you have something to say, your thoughts come out as sound, right? Production, right? So what are the important things here? Just let me kind of like bridge that in, right? It's important that the vocal cords are healthy. That's the bottom line. It's important that we are breathing correctly. That's the bottom line, right? It's important that we are decisive when we are engaging our material, our work, because you guys have ever experienced this where it's like you're looking at something new, you'll have a little stumble every now and then the more you see it, the more you say it, the more you repeat it and practice it, things clean up, right? And sometimes we want to try to do it on a single read, and you feel like this little bit of just slight pressure where you feel like, okay, I can't get this wrong, or I don't want to get this wrong. A lot of mental things start happening, right? Anybody gone through that at least once, right? And you see how the effect it has on your speaking mechanism. Sometimes it takes a while for things to relax down, right? In terms of production coming now into maintenance, that relaxation is very important because the more tension goes on those two little chords, the harder it feels physically. Going back to what I asked before about like everybody's felt that feeling of tightness in their throat at one point or another, and you can't quite tell what's happening, right? There are many possibilities when tension starts to appear in our speaking mechanism, in our instrument. It can have multiple physicalizations with just that same effect, right? You can have jaw tightness, right? You can have tongue tightness. If you happen to be an individual who, when you're dealing with something challenging or stressful, you clam up, you tend to go silent, right? A lot of that translates to physical tension, right? When our jaw tightens, we pull up, we pull our larynx up. So what happens is that voice box, instead of being nice, and that you guys have heard that feeling of looseness and freedom in the vocal cords, freedom in the speaking mechanism, that just means that your vocal cords are relaxed and descended. You don't want your vocal cords to pull up towards your jaw, right? In terms of singing, that's like you're singing and the notes are starting to ascend, and all of a sudden it feels like you're you're choking yourself. It feels like it's a choke. In speaking, that vocal reaction to nervousness where all of a sudden things go tight and you have like the effect of the butterflies of the stomach, right? Your throat tightens up. There's the expression of there's a knot in the throat, right? It's that your voice box is rising towards the bottom of your jaw. And the reason why it feels tight is because these two flaps, right? If you follow the crest to the very, very top, you'll feel something really, really hard, and sometimes there's a point, right? Above the two sides of our larynx, right? That little point, that little, almost like there's a bone up there. If you feel like there's a bone there, you're feeling the right thing. It is a bone. It's called the hyoid bone. The hyoid bone is where your tongue is anchored. That's how deep and long the human tongue is. Yeah, okay, here in the front, it might be, relative to the physicality, to the genetics, right? But that hyoid bone, the bottom of it supports the sides of your trachea, the top of it anchors your tongue, right? When we have a tight throat, your vocal cord, your vocal mechanism is coming up and your tongue is right in between. That's why it feels like there's no more. That choking feeling is because, yeah, you're choking on your tongue, literally, the base of it. Okay? So think about all of the things that you've heard about and things that have gone through in your lived experience with your voice, with the stuff that we've talked about. These are the mechanisms that are turning on. That's why you hear, speech teachers, vocal teachers, specialists say, you want to relax your throat. When they say relax your throat, it just means releasing the jaw, releasing tension as much as you can, right? That now leads to the maintenance part, because the reason why we come from a relaxed position, right? Notice how I haven't even said anything about placement. No placement yet. This is pure biology, right? This is something tangible that you can feel. The big thing with voice, it's all about feedback, physical feedback, sensations, the buzzing that you feel when you're speaking, those are really the only things that you really have. That's why working on the voice it's an ongoing thing and it's difficult, but not impossible. The maintenance part, that distended vocal cords, right? Relaxed vocal cords are free to vibrate. It's all about giving space for the mechanism to do what it needs to do. It needs to vibrate. You cannot make a sound without vibration passing through your vocal cords. When I teach little kids, and when, I'm primarily musical theater, right? Before I learned all of this stuff and, before all the biology of it all lined up, the little kids, right? They look at me when I say this and then they're like, what? You mean like I can't stop myself from breathing? I'm like, yeah, go ahead, Timmy. Keep talking, don't take a breath. And all of a sudden they keep talking, and all of a sudden their voice starts going like this, and you see their necks start getting tense, and it's like, there's no more air. What are you going to use to vibrate? And remember, breathing is involuntary. When you run out of air, there's no more oxygen in your lungs. Jumping in a pool, especially if the pool is cold. Same mechanism, right? These are signs we don't think about that biologically are always there. We just don't have a context for it because we don't think about it every day. So now we do. As voice users, now we do. Yeah. Question about the biology and all that stuff. This is just very brief. They're not difficult concepts. You know this already. You feel this already. I'm just putting words to it. Questions about that? No. At any point, guys, please do. If you have a question, something light bulbs in your head, just share. Okay. Um, So after all of that a bio, now we come into quality of sound, right? And this is actually I don't like this term, this title, though you've seen this many times before, because this is relative, okay? It's relative. There is no standard of quality of sound except for, oh, it's a whole sound without any distortion around it. Or it's a blown out sound and I can hear all sorts of distortion around it. Meaning, actually, if you guys have ever experienced that, a distorted sound coming from your mechanism or hearing it, as a listener, when there's too much air going through your vocal cords, you're blowing out, right? You'll get distortion. That's how you get rasp. And then that's how you get speaking down into the fry, meaning you're speaking with the tongue portion of your mechanism pressured onto your um, actual chords. And it forces your false chords to turn over your real chord, your true chords. Okay. Um, we've all heard this. We know this. If you need an example, it's when men start to talk like this and you hear that crackle because it's so hot and sounding. Sorry, 13-year-old, but you're going to get there anyway. So I'm not really saying sorry. Life moves forward, guys. Right? That's speaking into the fry. You do that long enough, you lose your voice. Because what happens is you're not letting your false chords lift, because the false chords will lift out of the way when you relax. And you can tell the relaxation when your vocal mechanism is much closer to this little divot. And just so you guys have the knowledge, this little divot is called the mandibular space. Or if you actually want the medical term, the mandibula fossa. Yeah, go ahead, Ree.
I have a question, Dan.
Mhm.
Why is there a true chord and a false chord, and like what's the difference?
Ah, good, wonderful. I've been
Thank
waiting
you.
for that. The reason why you have false chords and true chords are your false chords protect your true chords. It's like the epiglottis. Remember I mentioned before that your voice box and your airway is in the front, and then your esophagus, your eating tube, is in the back.
Yeah.
In the middle of that, there's a flap that closes the esophagus, right?
Yeah.
Let's just say this is the front, this is the back, right?
Mhm.
There's a valve that closes your epiglottis. And when you don't want anything going down that way, right? When you're breathing, that's closed. When you're eating, it
Mhm.
opens.
Okay.
You guys know when somebody gets, yung may nahihirinan,
Yeah.
food goes down the wrong way. That's because
Yeah.
something slips and goes to the front. Yeah. When you're getting, let's see, accent shift. When you're getting nahihirinan, you know, there's something irritating the front, and your false chords are the last line of defense before it goes all the way down. You
Okay.
know, this is why when people get CPR when they're drowning, water comes out. It doesn't all come from the stomach. Some of it comes from the lungs, right? Does that answer your question?
Yes.
That
Yes.
mechanism, there's two. So you have a mechanism that closes your food tube. You have a mechanism that closes and that protects your vocal cords.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's why it's there. Um, it's part of the structure, and I encourage you guys to Google this. Google the biology, look at the pictures. Um, if you can Google videos of this on YouTube. It's not a secret. you know. Um, all right. So again, quality of sound, very individual, right? So as a pedagogist, as a health professional, as a singer, which is my primary use for my voice, musical theater, um, it's about the quality of sound. You want a nice, full, you guys have heard the description, round sound, right? Because there are sounds that are naturally narrow, right? Now we're getting into, even though this says speech, this is where the accent part comes in, right? And I notice here in the Philippines, since I've landed, there's a lot of thought about neutralization because of the call centers, right? Yeah, question, Don.
Yeah. I have a question po. And why do twins and relatives are easily recognized, identified, and related to their relative families by simply listening to their voice?
Yeah, genetics.
Yeah.
Genetics. It's especially twins, right? Um, you can even see that feature with fraternal twins, twins that are not of the same sex, right? The same gender. And the reason why is because whether they're male or female, sometimes their voices are their structures are very, very close. They're very, very similar. Obviously, you can tell if it's like, you know, um, uh, an opposite gendered fraternal sibling situation, you could definitely tell the guy from the girl, right? But the reason why voice patterns have similarity, right, is because eventually you will fall into what's called a voice family. This is from the singing side, right? We've all heard soprano, tenor, alto, bass, right? And have you guys ever wondered why, even though it says SATB, it's still described as soprano, tenor, alto, and bass? Because the soprano and the tenor are the treble voices, the altos and the bass are the lower voices, right? And in terms of use, function, I'm going to use singing here because it's easier to understand. Sopranos are only an octave above tenors. That's why it's so easy for tenors to sing soprano material, right? And altos, since they are the lower end of the quote unquote feminine voices, right? Tenors have a trouble singing all of alto repertoire. Doesn't have to be classical; it could be other genre, because they can't go an octave lower into that. You know. So these arrangements are all additive, and the connection to your question, Don, is yes, those features. There are going to be voice features that will group people together. You guys have heard vocal groups or choirs live. If you listen to them live, um, you can tell a well-selected choir when they're warming up, and each um, vocal part, have homogeny in the sound. It sounds like one sound when they're singing together. Okay, yes, sounds like acoustic. Okay, so since you're bringing up acoustics, Don, that's your fault. So I will address that. It's not a fault. It's just, I'm very thankful that you brought that up. Okay, there is a misinterpretation of the word acoustics here in the Philippines. Acoustics mean the characteristic of the movement of the sound in the space. It's not something your voice creates. It is the way the sound articulates with a space. And when you hear that you have your own acoustics, that means you have your own sound characteristics. It's not entirely directed to voice characteristics. It's how your sound resonates either in a space or in your body. And that's very important. Um, you guys are noticing I'm starting to bring a lot of things musically, even though we're right now in our purpose where this is not really for music, but it's the same thing that happens. Um, if you guys ever get a chance, if you get a chance, and I hope you do, to travel to New York and watch a show from backstage in a theater, you'll be surprised how much tech is not there. Okay. The Philam Theater, right? That acoustics is because of, I don't know if you guys ever get a chance to do this. You look up and you'll see panels on the roof, right? Those panels help reflect sound. So depending on the sound that's being done live, now in modern houses, they shift. At the Sydney Opera House, their panels move. At the Met, the Metropolitan, you know, in New York, the panels move. The Disney theater in LA, panels move, you know? Yes, UN Avenue. So going back to that whole thing with physical acoustics, right? That's the feedback you get from your sound from your body. The bridge with the musical theater is in New York, it's not like here in Manila where from the audience you can see the tech right in front of the people. You can see their monitors, da 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 da. They're impressive, right? Well, all that tech equals more noise and distortion going into the glass mics of the performers, right? And when you have sound in, going into the mic, coming out of the speaker, into the mic, out of the speaker, eventually it will build noise and then you get feedback. That's why you have that. Have you guys ever heard that echo that sounds like you're in a bathroom, but it's made of glass? It's very tinny. There's no warmth in the echo. That's already the electronic buildup of the sound. In New York, we get two. Left monitor, right monitor. They are not in front of the orchestra pit. Why? Because the orchestra, the conductor, the musical director, they have mics. You put a monitor close to that mic, even if it's shielded, it's still gonna do the same thing. Not to mention the singers, okay, contrary to popular belief, also here, when you'll see this in the traveling shows, you'll see this in the shows that are sponsored by Broadway Asia, because those are the ones that use equity talent from the US, primarily from New York, because Broadway Asia is in New York. You'll see this difference with them because in addition to being a good vocal producer, meaning instrument, not producer in a studio, but your body, right? I'm not going to use the word good singer because that's relative. It also matters how good your sound tech is, because a smart sound tech will be very specific and sparing with reverb, echo, all of that stuff. Because the job is to highlight the voice. It's not to over magnify it so it sounds like karaoke, because all of that echo will build more noise in the space, right? You'll notice if you go to a New York theater that the bass is a little cut down, right? And that's for technical purposes, because left monitor, right monitor, that's all we get. That's all we get. So then what do we do? How do we handle our voices, especially if you're doing something like the King and I, The Sound of Music was recently here a couple of years ago, right? Shows that are not from the pop musical theater genre, like Fun Home, Rent, right? Because those orchestrations are primarily electric. The live ones, the ones that use 27-piece orchestra, 30-piece orchestra, right? And then you have to sing, you're behind them. You have to sing over that, right? This is where the acoustics in terms of the body come into play, because all you have are how your voice feels to you. That's your own acoustics. There's the acoustics that your voice produces in a space and how that space enhances or de-emphasizes that sound. The emphasis, because let's say, for example, you are at a meeting hall. Say, for example, like, you guys ever know that when you go into like a government building, your voice deadens as soon as you step in when there's carpet? The reason why your voice deadens is the carpet is eating the sound. You know, the seats, the walls, the drapery, it's all eating the sound. Second question from Don. When your tones, are you changing your harmonic frequency or your format frequency? Oh, okay. Okay. Love those words, they're great. But you know what? In terms of your vocal production, if you can't feel what those are, those terms won't help. So tightening your thyrovocalis muscles, that's great. Why would you need to do that? Is my question. What is, changing your harmonic frequency, meaning your pitch, your format frequency, meaning your rate of vibration? What do these mean? Because they're great words, but they're too smart for something that happens simply. So help me bridge this question. What specifically are you trying to ask? So once you reform your question, ask it again, because they're great. I know what these are, but again, simply put, what is the feeling you're describing? Okay. So once you digest that, you can re-ask your question and then we can address it. All right. Questions so far, right? So acoustics, right? You have your own acoustics, the feedback of your sound through your body, right? And then you have the hall, right? Now it's like, to these things, consonant articulation, your location of production, which is what you guys know as placement, resonance, presence, health, they all lead to, okay, so how does this help with cleaning up an accent? How does this help cleaning up what's coming out of your mouth when you have material, right? Okay. Don, please, if you're thinking of your question, please post it again because I do want to address it. And the reason why I'm asking you to do that is because this is great, right? But let's bring it to where our 13-year-old can understand it. Okay. So, let's slide into some accent discussion, right? Neutralization, right? In terms of neutralization, the first question that pops into my mind is what is being neutralized, right? Because in terms of, let's take call center work, right? The neutral you're getting is the accent of whoever's teaching you, right? And in the United States, from the eastern seaboard to the western seaboard is a good 5,000 miles, 4 time zones, right? So there is an accent variation that travels through all of that, right? Also, for example, can anyone tell that I'm from New York? No. What you know of somebody who sounds like from New York? There are features of the way I speak that sound like that. I can't escape it. Yeah, the Big Apple. Hmm. And the 4 other boroughs that surround it, because New York has 5 boroughs. Okay, you have Manhattan, Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island. Those are all 5. All right.
And radically different accents just between those. Right?
Yeah, it varies. It varies, but because we are a melting pot, you go into the island of Manhattan, nobody really cares. It just becomes a generalized thing, And remember, the island of Manhattan is a transitory island. Not everybody lives in Manhattan, But just like, the term the Big Apple connotes, it is a place that doesn't sleep. We don't shut down, But if I were to describe the way I speak to you guys, the only thing that's New York about how I speak is the speed. We speak fast. Yeah. It's not like in LA, right? And that is reflective of culture. Culture affects how the neutralization process can happen. Can, meaning there's other possibilities there, right? Now, if you were to ask me, okay, like, oh, how do I neutralize my accent? Well, Because you live here, well, this is your neutral English accent. What's so bad about that? You know, because that's your local English. That is the local functional English where we are right now, right? You know, so I like to challenge that term of neutralization to actually adaptation. You are adopting a new accent. That way, every time you need to speak that way, and that whatever that is being asked of you, it's a set specific thing that will turn on mechanisms, behaviors, and physical reactions from you and your instrument so that your body knows, this is what they need from me. This is how I must speak, right? Right? The only reason I speak this way is because of how many years I've spent in the performing arts. You need to present, you have to be clear. You can't talk to the mic like you're talking like this, You can't just throw around the words and you can't just press on the vocal cords. No, it's not going to work. If I talk like the way I talked like it was in high school, I wouldn't sound like this because I was living in the Bronx and I was surrounded by a very strong Puerto Rican community. Notice that I didn't say Puerto Rican, I said Puerto Rican. That's an accent shift that's showing up in variations in consonants and vowels, right? And you notice there's a behavioral change. I look more impatient when I speak with my normal New York accent. And what do we know about New York? Fast movers. What are the stereotypes of New Yorkers? Don't have the time, which is actually just a stereotype, because we were the first state that locked ourselves down. We were the first state where our governor went against the government and said, no, we are not behaving this way. Okay? But New York has always been like that. If you watch the movie Gangs of New York, if you watch the movie Titanic, all of that melting pot attitude, and even acting, the acting that we know in the modern Western era, right? Western realist acting, the stuff that we watch, right? All of that came from a mixture of Russian culture and New York immigrant Jewish culture. Yeah, it has nothing to do with some Filipino went to LA back in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, brought Chubbuck and Morris here and said, oh, this is how they act. Just for context, guys, there is no certification. You cannot study Chubbuck and Morris in the United States and end up with a teaching certification. They don't have one. Norris only released his book in the 80s. Chubbuck only started teaching in the late 80s. So in terms of the context of how the sphere of acting in terms of pedagogy started, you have your big five. Stanislavski, Strasberg, Meisner, Adler, Hagen, Spolin, the Greeks, because once it came from antiquity, the Greeks and the Romans, it then centralizes in Asia Minor, what used to be Asia Minor, the Russian Tsarist culture. This was before the Bolsheviks, before the United Soviet Socialist Republic. Okay, and I'm bridging that to help you guys understand that you already have the mechanism to help yourselves out. You have ears, you have a mind, you have a heart, and you have a mouth. Right? Now, how does this all translate to accent? Well, di ba nga, neutralization is a relative term. Kung neutral, ano yung neutral sa Pilipinas? Neutralization. What's the neutral English in the Philippines? You guys have a couple. It's not just one. You guys have a few, right? Because like if I was in Makati and I was walking around Greenbelt, then all of a sudden I have all of this uptalk, di ba? Right? And then my neck starts to move around like I'm some kind of blah, 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 blah. Do you guys know why that's here in our country? It's very simple. It's a very simple answer. Do you know why it's here in our country? Because the closest side of the United States here is California.
It's the Valley Girl equivalent.
Exactly. And because we eat a lot of American media, it's a culture. There's a lot, and I'm bringing this up because start noticing the culture of the media you consume. This will help you when you get your reading work, when you get your voice work. You're not just approaching it because of a placement. You guys have experience, because I've experienced this too. Learning how to use the voice using placement. Oh, put it here. Oh, put it here. Oh, put it here. Oh, put it there. Do you do that when you're actually conversing? When you're talking to your friend, when you're having a beer night, do you think about that? I mean, honestly, does that even cross your head? No, di ba? So bakit pa natin pahihirapan yung trabaho natin? Right? That we're only being asked to speak, right? So let's approach this from there, right? In terms of accents, the kind, the type, the style. What are the features that you're hearing, right? There are features there. There are nuances there. You guys notice when I go from how I normally speak to when I speak Tagalog, the melody changes. When I speak Tagalog English, when I speak Filipino English, the word usage changes. My body changes, the behavior changes. Kasi the way we speak reflects part of our truth. Hindi natin yan makakalasan. It's just like that. This is how we know when our friends are lying to us. It's also how our parents know when we're hiding something from them, even though we don't tell them, and we think that we're being slick. Because there's a behavior. One of the best places, actually, just a fun thing, one of the best places to practice this is at airports, especially here in the Philippines, because we tend to be sparing about our true feelings. When we're saying goodbye to somebody, when we're saying hello to somebody, you can really tell how that person means to the person receiving them or letting them go, what's going on. There's a lot of information. You know who does this? Laura Dern, the actress, does this. There have been a few interviews where she describes this, because the interactions that happened in airports, even the speaking that you hear, happened in a public, private space. And it's very telling. So one of the first things that I like to kind of introduce, because it's softer on our system, it's easier to understand, is what are behaviors that are coming along with the accents that you want to study, that you want to acquire, what you want to practice, right? What are the behaviors that come along with it? How does that then feed the speaking mechanism, your voice, right? Right? You guys won't be able to tell that as I'm speaking right now, I've spent 4 years living in the United Kingdom, right? Because that feature is not on. But if I were to actually read something or talk to somebody from there, all of a sudden things start to change. The expression starts to change, the movement starts to change, right? And this is not particular, this is just one of many accents in the British Isles, right? So you're not going to hear somebody from Bridgerton speaking like this, because what they use is conservative British pronunciation. It's a very old way of speaking English, a very, not a good way to describe it, but neutral way of speaking English, you know? But when I was there, I was living in the middle of London. So I have features that come from that part of the estuary, meaning the river, you know? What's happening now is a little bit of a modern adjustment called multicultural London English, where things are a little bit harder, you know? It's another accent altogether, you know? Slight change, and all of a sudden features start to show up, right? Miss Saki, do you like the accent? Or are you saying that the British accent is nice in your ears? Or Because it changes my voice. The reason why accents change voices is because they belong in different parts of our mechanism. American English is spoken up and behind the nose. Oh, I mean, it's thank you, but there's like a level of unfairness there because I did live there for a very long time. So, you know, it's it's just noticing the features of the sound around you. The neutrality that's spoken about in call centers is actually a Midwest accent. It's not as neutral as people think it is. It's a very Midwest accent. Why? Because yes, very good, correct. You know why, Luis? Because we speak with neutral consonants and neutral vowels. All our vowels are open. A, E, I, O, U. And our alphabet is really hyperphonetic. Hyperphonetic. Kasi, di ba? Abakada, egaha, ila, mananga, right? None of our consonants are alone by themselves. They're paired with a vowel. So our alphabet is syllabic. That's what makes our ears very tuned to hearing other sounds. Tick box number 2, right? Give you guys self a pat give yourselves a pat on the back from coming from a culture that is a syllabically linguistic culture, because your ears are attuned to many different sounds, which is not the same for Americans. They cannot do diphthongs. They do not know the difference between nanga and ga. They say which when you look at the letters is not quite correct. You know, right? The articulation is in the front. But when it comes to mechanism, speaking mechanism, even singing, you line up your vowels and you articulate with the consonants in the front of your mouth. You don't futz around with the relaxation that you've already achieved in your jaw, the soft palate, the back of the mouth, the neck. We don't futz around with that anymore. You know, like when you see me speak, it's all here, right? Even if I speak with a different accent, a different Western accent, it's all here, right? This articulation will change depending on the locality, you know, right? Depending on the locality. Because if I hop on a Roro in Batangas or a Supercat and I go far enough south, so my English is going to change ba like this badong. So, oh my gosh, you know, because I have cousin from I have cousin from Iloilo badong, but so many people over there, you know, features, right? Features. And it changes behavior. You have to give yourself time, right? Because the auditory acquisition, like how we hear it, the mechanism, how do we get it from here to here, right? There's an embodiment that has to happen, right? What is it like when you hear somebody from the South here in the Philippines? What's it like? Does it make you laugh? Is it entertaining? Is it da, 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 da? Because all of that information helps it get easier. Then it becomes just listening to where they place the vowels. What happens when I speak using a Southern accent here in the Philippines? My jaw changes, right? The back of my jaw does not change, but here, you know, oh, oh my gosh, sus ginoo, you know, kita mo man din si kuya, nagrumble din sa balay. This is not my dialect. I come from Mindoro. We speak like there's notes in the wind. It's like the accent in Marinduque and Batangas put together, you know. But even in Batangas alone, you know, there are little features, right? You know, if I target the way my cousin speaks, you know, it's like, they have this, I was driving across the United States and then I found this sign, it says Indianapolis. Indianapolis. Oh, I thought the police is only like the Caucasian, I did not know there was Indianapolis. No, 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 Tito, it's Indianapolis. It's a place, right? See how you know, just behavior alone, right, affects how you receive it and how it comes out, right? And that's the whole point with why I have on this one, the nuances, the oratory, the mechanical. You guys all know this already. You know this. It's just a matter of sharpening how you pick it up, right? And how it specifies, right? Cleanup is just an easy way of describing specification, right? You know, it's like when I got off the plane, ladies and gentlemen, please proceed. It's the very same thing, right? But when you go to when you go to another country, it's a very, ladies and gentlemen, we are now. It's very declarative, right? It's not this whole like, all of a sudden I'm going to speak to you and you're frying. Can you feel the arch in my lower back? Because this is how I was told to speak to you guys. Can you not see me swirling my lower bottom? Because this is what. And it's like, girl, I just landed. I just want to shower, relax, you know, stay in Sogo. I'm over there. See you later, you know. Sorry for your stereotype, but we get this, right? Right? But we're so accustomed already. It has been acculturated to us to receive that as a normal thing, right? You guys should have seen my sister's face, my sister and my brother's face when we stepped out of the plane a couple of years ago before the lockdown. They were like, ooh, she's having a lot of fun. But it's a peg. And I had to tell them, I was like, no, no, that's just how they do announcements. No, 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 relax. You know, you don't have to drop a quarter in some machine and all of a sudden some curtain opens up. No, no, no. That's not going to happen. Right? Um, a call center example is like when I bank with Chase. So when I call customer service, it comes out over here. Ladies and gentlemen, so thank you for calling Chase Manhattan. My name is Mage. And I'm like, yes, Mage, I know you're from the Philippines because only Filipinos will name their daughters Mage. A stereotype, right? Already as an American, stereotype, diba? Right? If you call somebody in the US, no matter where they are, that sound, everybody knows that comes from the middle of the country because she didn't say thank you. She said, thank you. Thank you. She said she didn't say thank you for calling Chase Manhattan. Thank you for calling JP Morgan Chase. She said, thank you for calling JP Morgan Chase. That sound, that's in the middle of the United States. That is not neutral. It is not neutral. It comes from the middle of the United States. From Chicago, once you get out of Pennsylvania, it's that. It transitions to that. So that's Ohio, Indiana, Chicago, Michigan, it's that. It's not even the center. It's actually the north part of after the Eastern Seaboard, the next time zone over, right? But we don't hear it. We don't hear it unless somebody points it out, you know. Another example, and I'm going to use all of these American examples because we hear it a lot here. We hear it in our media. We hear it in spots that are recorded here and not brought over. They do a local recording of the spot, right? That in terms of a Southern accent, we all over here, there's only one Southern accent, but in America, there's like 13 because there's like 13 states in the South. There are nuances in those groupings of states. Let's go back to what features and nuances would come out of a Southern accent. There's two. There's the twang and the drawl. Twang is, if you've ever heard Justin Timberlake speak with his natural accent, that's a twang. Okay? A drawl is Forrest Gump. One is flat and tight, the other one is rounder, you know? If I spoke to you like I was from Georgia, it would turn in such a way. And if we got into a car and drove ourselves down and cut down through the deepest South and end up in Louisiana, lifts start happening, the colors of the accent start changing, the N's start changing, the R's start changing. And if we push ourselves all the way down back in the car and shift this all the way to Georgia, all the way to Alabama, all of a sudden the words just got thrown around. These are different accents. They're not just South, right? If ever Florida stops becoming a no-visit state, you can see features in Florida that are different because they have a large Latin American population there, right? They are the closest tip of the United States to Puerto Rico, Cuba, Haiti, Dominican Republic, right? Plus, they are also connected to the South because of the Panhandle. They have a border that's right into the Gulf of Mexico, touching New Orleans, Louisiana, You watch movies like Color Purple, you watch movies like, the Southern Belle movie, like Steel Magnolias, where things start to soften. And they can insult you so beautifully just by talking like this. You wouldn't know that you're being told to go home to your mama because all it's gonna do is make you laugh. Changing, I can't do it without moving my body a certain way, And these are the things that if you're alone in a booth and you need, that's like, oh man, I'm hungry, I gotta do this. These are the things that can help things move along. How do you specify all of these things? Knowledge of the region. Okay, knowledge of the region. If you are in a particular region, let's say you go down to CDO, that's far, far down, right? That's like Muslim country, Philippines, right? What are the features? You travel to other countries, other Southeast Asian countries. How do their English sound? Right? What makes Malaysian English very different from Singaporean English, canceling out those who are Malaysian and Singaporean but spent most of their lives in the United Kingdom? Because now that's a complete accent shift. They are more bicultural, which is, in my generation, what happened to me. I'm a bicultural American. I don't consider myself a Filipino American. I consider myself a bicultural American because I don't have to adjust. When I get off the plane, I know I'm here. The wall of the smell alone. If you guys have ever flown, you know how when the plane is descending and they change the air conditioning stops and it's just the natural air coming through the plane because they need all the power for the landing mechanism, right? I can tell before we hit 1,000 feet that I am in the Philippines because of how the air changes in the airplane. Because the smell turns on my memory banks. Same thing with the US. I know I'm home, but over there it's a lot sooner. Because as soon as I start seeing the prefab housing from the window, I'm like, oh, I'm back. Different reaction, right? And it's always like that for me, even though, I don't know. I don't always feel excited when I go back home. It's never really a feeling of full excitement. It's like, well, that was fun while it lasted. Now I'm back. That's usually my feeling when I return to the US. Over here, it's more like, yes, soot. I love it. It's a different experience for me. I feel like coming home here is much more rewarding than going home over there. But this goes back to the nuances, all of that kind of stuff. But let's go from the neutralization and the cleanup. How do we do that? Because it's always asked of us, right? It's always asked of us to speak clearer, be more sure with the sound, right? Oops, sorry. The specificity, the accuracy, the clarity. We spoke about regionality, locality, and the variations in the sound. I just wrote this down so that you have kind of like, oh, okay, this is what we just touched on, right? Should you guys continue on and we get to do this all in person, it's gonna be a lot. This is where the physicality starts to come in, the physical work, the roundness, the releasing, okay? The releasing of the jaw. Noticing, for example, let's say the variations in the southern part of the Philippines, middle to southern, right? So you go to a regular Visayan region like Iloilo, and like you'll hear the word massage, masads, right? Massage. You go to Aklan and they say masad. Magamasad po, masad. It's a feature they don't realize because there's something in their language, there's something in their speaking in that particular place where they hear the hard part of the G, not the diphthong, not the j. They hear the massage, they hear the j part, not the j. And if that's the sound that's familiar and related to their way of speaking, that's what their ear is going to magnet to, right? Di ba nga, Aklan, it's already in the south, right? But within there, the features are different, right? Like if I translate this to like we were playing around with it, I was playing around with that southern accent thing, right? Somebody from Georgia, instead of saying oil, they'll say owl, like owl, owl, because it's hard for them in their tongue positioning to articulate the oi sound, oi. To them, it's ow, right? And you guys know this former TV chef called Paula Deen? She's like the queen of butter. If you watch
Salad,
features, yeah,
everything about it.
exactly. If you find features of her on YouTube, old videos, you'll hear that little fight. It's like she had to practice to say it for TV. You'll hear that little fight. Okay. And in New York, right? In New York, we don't say the store.
The store?
Yes, correct. Yes, Ree, exactly.
Yeah, that's why my lola is Bisaya. She says birthday. She can say birthday.
Yeah,
Birthday.
happy birthday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I understood her more when this prof told us that that's how they hear. That's the only thing they have in their vowel sounds. Like, oh, that makes more sense. And parang, 'di ba, parang pinagtatawanan natin sila. And when I heard that, parang hindi na ako masyadong tumatawa kasi it's not something to laugh about. Kasi yun
Yeah,
yung
because you
culture
get
nila
it.
eh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you get the
Because
context.
that's how their culture is. If you live there, you're gonna speak like that. You're gonna sound like that. You don't laugh because they don't sound like you. And
Right.
ganon.
It's
Yeah.
region specificity, correct.
Yeah.
And for us, that kind of region specificity, actually, Alijan, don't worry about the hard tongue thing because New Yorkers have a hard tongue. We don't say THE, we say duh. That's why you get that Brooklyn, forget about it, right? We have that hardness there's a feature of that Aljan in a global sense. And like what Ree was saying, the very context. Once the context clears itself up in your mind, right? All of a sudden, your way of approaching that sound becomes, you know, a different thing. Yes, I have friends and family that are Kapampangan, you know. And food aside, when it comes to listening, right? There and I'm glad this is all coming up now, because one of the biggest helpers in accent clarification, and now it's the first time I'm going to use that accent clarification, cleaning up the specificity of the context is the first thing that's going to change the way you hear, because there's a point of understanding, right? There's a point of understanding. For example, let's take a neutral international phenomena that we all know. We all have heard Australians speak, right? You guys ever wonder how they got that way? How their speech became that way? Australia was established before the Brits used it as a penal colony. They sent their prisoners to Australia, right? You already have that mixture of the Aborigines and the Rapa Nui, you know, the people that originally inhabited those islands. But then with New Zealand being so close, why is it that they speak differently from the Australians, right? So we can tell the British roots, right? We can tell the British roots, we can hear it, right? But then we start to suddenly notice the uptalk in what they use, and the features slightly different from how the British use the same vowels and consonants in the way they speak. Okay, yeah, right? And already the placement of it is very, very different once you use it in your mechanism. Normally, when you all listen to me at the top of the hour, this is not where my voice normally places. But Australian accents are spoken widely. But it doesn't stop the openness in the back of my throat. It's still there, right? Tighter even still is when you go to New Zealand, and it sounds like the smiling. If you watch this a Heartbreaker on Netflix, yeah, they have a teacher, you know, who has a really, really strong, tight up and high, just like a New Zealand feature, yeah. This is something I've just been practicing since May, right? English accent in Australian, right? The variation, right? I could talk to you like this, or I could talk to you like this. But notice that intonation itself changes it all. British people speak forward like this, you know, intonation that changes it all. You've all heard Australian newscasts, right? Because we're here in the Philippines, right? You know, the features of their speech lean into a little bit of uptalk. And as they're talking to and reading through the news, the flow, you know, it moves just a little bit this way, flows up, just like that, right? Right? You get an understanding of that lift, right? But how does it connect to that British accent that was responsible? The British was responsible for sending people there, actually the first Caucasian settlers in Australia were not British, they were Dutch. It was the British that sent the first mass migration in terms of Caucasians because they used it to dump their prisoners, right? But as you travel up the British Isles, things start to sound a little bit different, right? You travel far north to Scotland and start speaking with a Glaswegian accent. It's the accent that, you know, uh, uh, um, James McAvoy speaks with a sound like this, you know. Now you're starting to hear a lift. You're starting to hear that lift in the back of the accent, you know, that's spoken, and the R's are a lot more articulated, you know, and that thinness in the sound, right? And if you drive this further forward and cross the ocean to the land of St. Patrick's, right? The specificity is far more featured. The R's are softer. It starts to remind the person about how it translates to an American type of sound. You know, going over to the Northern Ireland, that roll in the R, the glottal R, that almost sounds like it comes from French, where they have a purely glottal R further in the mouth. You know, this is why when they speak names like, Mireille and Robert, the articulation right in the back of the throat, you know, loosen, no, letting the behavior bring in the articulate, bring it in, because this is how you speak, this is how they want to express themselves this way. Yeah. Just think of just think of Jean-Paul Gaultier, the reason why this French speak with a lot of different forward action in their speaking is because their accents, c'est ça? Oui. That's also not fair because French is one of my languages. I've been speaking French for a long time, you know. But do you know how I got through all of these language classes as an opera singer? I started speaking English in those accents first, and then it helped me learn the language. Like this whole quintessential thing about Italians, like that. They sound more like New York Italians, and New York Italians are not, they're the migrants, Oh, why didn't you go to Italy? Things are very legato, and it reflects in the way they speak to tell everybody, when they speak to tourists, they come into Rome, Napoli, in the south, the reason why they have this connection and the stresses in Italian is because the double consonants mean something to them. Double N, N, double Z. That's why it's a pizza, because double Z in Italian is a stopped consonant. Pizza, Io parlo italiano. Sì, ma va bene. Ma perché dobbiamo mettere l'uova? You guys hear those double stops? Mettere. Ma perché? Dobbiamo, 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 right? Canadians, that's another feature. Northeast America. I mean, Northeast American, not United States, but the Americas, right? You go to Quebec, you get a whole different feature of English, right? They speak like a mix of somebody who has spoken Portuguese for a long time and a little bit of French and a little sprinkle of an Italian English. Their English, the way they speak English is this very unique thing, right? The Canadian accent is a very stereotyped accent in the sense that when you listen to Canadians in Toronto, right? They don't say Toronto, they say Toronto, right? Yes. The secondary language in Canada is French, more so in the East. When you go to Vancouver, it's like, what? It's a requirement in school, but they don't normally use it. It's kind of like how at one point in the Philippines, Spanish was an educational standard. We had to learn it, right? My generation was the point where like it was already separating, because in Xavier it was all tungko, Actually, that's one of the things that bridged, because I did not come from a Mandarin speaking household. I was the only one,
Same.
right? I was the only one. So I had to figure out a way to help myself. And so it was more like, and I got slapped for this at home. Little did I know that I was already showing features of being a performer at that age, because I would speak English with a Mandarin accent and my mom would slap me. My dad would get so mad because my dad worked for China Bank. So, we would go into Binondo to pick up my dad, when he has like overtime, and like, at that time, boss pa yung mga hopiaan, late at night, and they're baking. So it's like fresh and hot, the square ones. And so my mom would drive, we'll go to Binondo, we'll pick him up from Pasig. And then all of a sudden, like, I'll copy what they were saying. And then my mom would be like, "Psst," And then I'll slip again after dad gets into the car, and then my dad goes, "Don't do that." And then I keep doing it, and then later on from the driver's seat, flop. You know, and to me, I was just playing with the sound. But of course, you're a kid, right? Everything is very, what you see is what you get with children. I wasn't of the age yet where it's like you don't do that in front of people. There is something called decorum. But bridging that to this whole thing with accent, I hope you guys are starting to get that this is not about undoing what you know. It's lining them up so that when you need something from your instrument, you won't be too peg reliant. The peg is just information. Okay, what does the client need? Da, 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 da. Right? And then you go into your mechanism and be like, okay, it's this, it's that. If you're lucky enough that they give you what you have to read beforehand, you get to see it before, which I know here is not a thing. Back home, when you're hired for something and they send you your contract and packet, your material comes along with it. And if any edits happen from the original to what they come up with when you get to the booth, you see versions of that. They email it to you now. Back then, they would send it to you in like manila envelopes and all that stuff, right? So I hope you guys don't feel like this is like, oh, I learned it wrong. No. None of that, right? And the biology, that's just for you to get to know, for you to have a physical context to how your mechanism works. And please, I am a big proponent for experimentation. You want to try things out? Go ahead, find a source, right? Try it out, right? Neutralizing English, just decide to learn an English accent, a way of speaking English from America or the Brits or another place in Europe or whatever the peg is, right? Or whatever your curiosity leans, right? Just learn it as a separate accent. It would be much easier than trying to force your way of speaking through something else that you don't normally do, Just learn it as something new. It's much less complicated than saying, oh, I got to correct this, I got to correct that, I got to correct this, I got to correct that, Oh, and also, Don, if you have figured out how to ask your question in a more understandable term, don't forget, I'm still willing to answer that. Right? Are we game with that? That, these are just for you to take what you already know and keep going forward with it. This is not about undoing. The only thing I will discuss about undoing things is if something's happening and it hurts, if you're feeling tension, things that are definitely going against your mechanism, your instrument, because those are the things that are going to get in the way. Your voice will react when you're tired. Make sure you have lots of things. Make sure you're hydrated. Make sure you're sleeping well. And I kid you not, right now it's like a working vacation for me because I'm home, right? When I'm in the other place, right? When I have a rehearsal, it's like my life changes. People are up, like they're just about ready to kill me because I drop in and out of social media. And the reason is whenever I get into, let's say I have a project, I'm in rehearsal, right? And you guys will be surprised how quick we put up musicals. It only takes us a month, 30 days, 5 weeks. Yeah, because we're there 8 hours a day. And the reason why we get to do it is because we are given our material firsthand. We get our material because when we sign that contract, are expected to be 60% familiar with our material at first rehearsal. Meaning, we sit down for the table read. Oh, that's another thing. Table reads are not a thing here in the Philippines. Table reads are a point of information for everybody in the production. If, as an artist, you come up with something that they like, they will change the material. If there is something that you're doing that the production team likes, the director likes, they see it in the table read. This is why we don't get to waste time in the rehearsal space. By the time we get to the theater, we are running through our blocking and da-da-da-da. It's just getting the cues together. Kaya ang bilis eh. You know, because we are already ready at first rehearsal. Because that day is hard. Your music rehearsals are usually in the morning, and then you take a break, and then you have your movement, which is anything that's dance, blocking, all that stuff, in the second part of the day. By the time you get to between 4 to 6 o'clock, right? It is possible to have run through the full show. Possible. Yeah, you still have to practice the choreography that you learned. You still have to, pero mabilis eh. We're usually done working the technicalities of a show by day 3 or 4. And then day 5, Friday, let's say we started on Monday, day 5, we're already running through the whole thing. Yeah, you might forget something. Yeah, things might be dropped, blah, 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 blah. But the flow exists. There is a flow. And it's that flow that makes the show seamless. The more seamless that flow is, the more fantastic, the audience can lose themselves. Kasi hindi kita yung tahe. Yari.
I have a question, Dan. Kasi I'm having a hard time with theater production. So for example, the director is gonna give me like, I need you to walk like this. I need you to be dignified. Your shoulders should be like this. Your hand should be swinging like this. And then I have to get my voice from the diaphragm. I'm not sure if I said that right. Pero nawawala na yung nawawala na yung focus ko sa voice production because my head is like in all of my body parts. So can you give me a tip? How can I combine all of that? Okay, my shoulder should be like this, my arm should be like this, my legs, my feet should be like this. And then when I speak, how can I focus then? It's from the diaphragm and not from the throat because I'm really having a hard time with that.
Yeah. Well, firstly, what you're describing, Ree, is the same thing that happens when somebody in the booth is throwing of somebody laying voice work out 1,000,001 descriptions to the point where you're like, what? Wait, what? And then all of a sudden you can feel the tightness rising in your throat because it's like, and then now you're worried that if you don't deliver, they're going to replace you, So let's set that aside. That's false pressure because you are not in the moment of what you're doing. You're in the moment of what you're being told.
Yeah.
So you're in that moment. Yeah. So one thing that can help instances like that is to sometimes the people giving us those pieces of information, they're not trying to kill us. They just don't know what they're asking for. They haven't put it together in their heads. Because is it easier? This is for everybody, huh? Brgy, your question, I'm going to pose it for everybody. Isn't it easier when somebody tells you, this person, this is what they went through? What does that look like? Then maybe you do 2, 3 passes, and then all of a sudden they're like, yeah, keep that. That's it. Rather than hyper controlling your head's here, your neck's here, your shoulders like that, then you might as well go to a hip hop class. Bing, you might as well go to a hip hop class. Because by the time your physicality catches to their creative guess, really, this is how you know your production team hasn't done your job. They don't have a story to tell you. When your production team has no story to tell you, even for voice people, if your booth people, if the product owners, if all of the advertising, the marketing people don't have a story to tell you, they did not do their work. Because it is not your job to create their product story for them. It's for you to physicalize their ideas. The talent's role is to physicalize the ideas. and then bring it into an imaginary a world, into a fantasy, whatever you want to call it, imaginary circumstance, whatever it is, doesn't matter, into a world where then you can release your talent into, and then they can say, oh, is that what we're looking for? I'm not sure, but that was good. You guys have ever been to those kind of things that you come up with something and then they weren't expecting it, then all of a sudden they're like, shoot, you know, oh, so who has the pressure now? Them. They have to choose, right? In a way, I'm kind of asking you to be counterculture because this challenges a lot of things here in the Philippines. Because sadly enough, in the entertainment industry, in the arts industry, position, just like politics, breeds power. And when somebody feels like you know you can do something more than they expect you to, and they cannot tell you anything because they didn't think that far, they like, it's like instead of taking the ownership on them, they like to push what went wrong. They're looking for somebody to blame, so to speak. Sorry for our little 13-year-old. Dan is not ranting. This is just, this is how the industry is, and better that you know what can happen rather than be hurt by what happened. It's a point of mental health, you know. I know it's kind of sad that, oh, and also, by the way, if you guys ever wonder how casting happens in the West, I'm going to say the West, even though it might be triggering, but on the other parts of the world, they don't cast for type, they cast for personality because the personality can produce the type, you know? And going back to your question, Ree, and how everybody can bridge that, what can you do, right? So, if they can't tell you the story, piece the story together from what they can't interpret for you. If they have trouble interpreting what they need, turn on your classroom listening skills rather than your talent listening skills. And then start doing a little, if you guys have ever done any of the Meisner stuff with Meisner Studio Manila or Sightlines Actor Space, you can use that. Do a repetition in your head. They're telling you a lot of things. They're telling me a lot of things. Just to ground yourself. And then what are they telling me? What are they telling me? What are they not sure? Basically, they won't know that you're babysitting them because you're trying to piece together a ton of information that they couldn't articulate in the first place, right? So that the pressure on your instrument to produce a result is going to shift. You are now understanding, okay, what's the story I'm trying to tell here? Your why questions transform into what questions. Why questions tend to look for results in terms of an answer. What questions are more assessive? You're looking for an assessment. What is the story they're trying to bridge across? Then it doesn't become personal anymore in terms of like, you're hearing all this volume and words and it feels like it's coming at you. It's really not. They just don't know what they're asking for. That's all. So you can start with that to start looking for the what questions. How to bring your mechanism in if you're already broken to that point of nervousness, if like, oh, nag-build up na siya. How to get yourself back, ground yourself in the moment. What's the story I want to tell with the information they give me, right? Then take a breath, take that nice big, we've done this in class before, remember? We like that whole full, right? Pretend you're breathing. Guys, this is also another thing. It's a straw breath. You're pretending you're breathing through a straw. But when you do that with intention, you're going to feel your vocal mechanism align. Because as you breathe in, you feel the expansion, right? That expansion is not just for your mental health and setting up the air in your lungs. That expansion is releasing your diaphragm into a relaxed state so you're not so nervous that your diaphragm is pushing up into your lungs. You guys feel that pit in the stomach kind of feeling, that nervous feeling? The reason why we get that as human beings is because we have the longest nerve in our body is called the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is a collection of multiple nerves that receive information from emotion and outside information, auditory, visual, the five senses, right? And the nerves that come up from the diaphragm and the stomach innervate with that in the spine. So there's information that travels. That's why we get that feeling of butterflies in the stomach. It is an emotional, it's basically part of your flight response, flight or fight response. It's a way for your body to make a decision on what to do in the moment. That's why we have that. So the best ways to approach situations like that when you're working is to ground into the moment. What does this moment need? What story am I going to try to tell with the information that they give me? Okay, what are the possibilities? You don't have to choose one. Sometimes you just take that first breath, you go, and then they see that you've released all of that tension, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, whoa, okay. Yeah, so what do we do with this one now? We can't say that this wasn't good because we're affected, right? So just like that whole Meister thing, even with products, even with announcements, even with PSAs, all that stuff, it's the selling. The selling is not really the deepest point. The selling is, have I gotten you emotionally that when I say, but you want to try this, you know? Kaya ang galing ng Apple eh. Tingnan mo ang ads ng Apple. Halos wala na nagsasalita. Why? Because we're so all over their material. I mean, guilty as charged, you know? And all of a sudden, hindi mo alam, 10 years ka na palang bumibili ng anong Apple M&M na yan. All of a sudden, there's nothing around your body that doesn't say Apple. Naging Apple ka na nga, Because what they did was, instead of selling to the people, what they did is they offered out a culture. They put out a story. They put their products in a context of a story. You guys remember that Justin Long commercial with Apple? I'm a PC, I'm a Mac, right? That's totally a cultural shift that had nothing to do with selling, but they knew that if they did that, the marketing team had the psychology to know that all they needed to do, yes, connecting with your audience, Luis. All you need to do is nudge the right way, I mean, either you voted pink or you voted red, white, and blue. And if you voted red, white, and blue, and now you're in the red, white, and blue now, and you're going, paano ito nangyari? Really? Really? I mean, I can say that because technically I'm a non-resident. If you guys try to shoot me, don't worry, I'll leave. Give me 3 weeks, I'll be leaving, It's going back to the moment. And like Luis said, the connection to the audience. You can't connect to the audience if you offer them numbers, but you can connect to the audience if you say, hey, you having a hard time? How you doing? Hallmark, we're a part of your life, Kaya nga, di ba, in the 70s yung commercial ng Hallmark? Oh, Reed, thanks for joining. I hope this helps you, and I hope you keep playing around. Yeah, Reed,
Thank you so much,
keep playing
Dan. Thank you,
around. You're
Giselle.
welcome. Yeah, keep playing around. In the 70s, that Paul Anka song, they used it as a Hallmark commercial. Do you guys know that? You can look it up on YouTube. Paul Anka has this song called "A Part of Your Life," and here in the Philippines, Hallmark. Yes, yes. And the reason why they used it is because at that time, ballads were, up until now, ballads were all over the radio. I mean, Between Walang Ningning was on play and every jeepney from EDSA to Pasay. I mean, come on, you know? So they used it, Hallmark used it as a marketing thing to do what Luis was just saying. How do you connect, right? Yes. Right. Oh, okay. That done, right? Check out that part of the chorus, right? I mean, balutin mo ako sa hiwaga ng iyong pagmamahal. Suman, your favorite dessert. 'Di ba? You could take that and sell anything. I mean, like, balutin mo ako sa Playtex, a woman's best friend. You know, balutin mo ako sa Johnson and Johnson Band-Aid for a mother who cares. You know, because the point is, balutin mo nga ako. You know, so anong gusto mong ibenta? Suman, Band-Aid, feminine products, t-shirt. Yes, exactly. Now you guys are getting it. Now you guys are getting that third thing that can help you when you're in studio. Basically, you're good. I mean, for lack of a better thing, it's like it's pretending that you don't belong in the culture and knowing the secret passageways of how to get the culture. You know, that's the other layer. That's why I mentioned culture early on. It's the whole idea of when you go to work, that's your space. You can do anything there. So if it helps you to pretend that you are not of this culture, but you know the ins and outs, that can help you get closer to what you need to deliver verbally. Yes, Don, correct. And it's not just Filipino, any, any mentality, any cultural mentality, you know. One of the best places to observe that, fast food. You guys get spaghetti and rice in your McDonald's. We get nothing. McDonald's sells chicken in only sandwich form and nuggets. That's all we get. But you guys get spaghetti, there's rice, there's like drumsticks, you know. We have a Jollibee in New York, right? I'm close to two Jollibees, the one in Manhattan and the one in Jersey City. Okay. We have two Jollibees, but we only get the mango pie. We don't get any other, you know? Yeah, and incidentally, that Jollibee is in the heart of the theater district. It's right across from from Penn Station. So it's like boom right there, right? But even still, they had to culturally curate the menu for us. It had to be quick selling. Yeah, we don't have peach, Francel. We just have mango. Because, you know, yes. And also, that's one of the first items, the Chicken Joy, is one of the first things that they sell out of. If they do, they're not allowed to because in the US it's like supply, you know. But these are all just examples of how culture can help you when you're working and not just getting into the nitty-gritty of how to say things, how the sound should come out of your mouth, just understanding so that experiences like what Ree was talking about, where all of a sudden you feel the punches of the pegs and you're like, well, what's the story here, guys? Right? Understanding how to cross the culture so that the connection can happen, those two alone can move your mind away from just the psychological patong-patong, and then you're free to execute what you rehearsed or execute what you wanted to try, you know, things like that. And again, in terms of accent, it's specificity, listening. Notice we haven't even discussed the whole like, okay, you're speaking this accent. It's like, what's it like? What's the sensation like? What's the feeling like? Right? Because you guys know this. This is something you already engage in. It might not have been explained this way, but something that you already engage in. And you have the agency to discover and explore with your own instrument so that okay, yes, I did work on this, rather than just listening and then, because another way of learning this is to listen and copy. But listening and copying there's a limitation to that. Because if you don't understand how the physicality is happening, what are you copying? Pitch, rhythm, speed. But if you don't know how to articulate it here, how's it going to happen? Because this is where it comes out. Yeah. Yeah. Everybody good so far? Yeah. That's just that this is it's really this simple. And we made it this simple so that should you guys proceed on and join the sessions, that you can ask specific questions already. We don't have to start from zero. If you have a mechanism question, if you have a biology question, or if you guys have examples that you realize, like a read or something that you guys have, and you're like, you know what? When I did this, it felt a different way. Can we, try it or work on it? Let's pass through this. Bank scripts are great for that. Because over here they all sound the same, right? And then all of a sudden, everything that has to be sold to the public sounds the same. We also have a tendency here in our culture to rush English, you know? Yeah, yeah, I know the spot might only be 30 seconds, but when you're speaking clearly, you will have the time. If you're not thinking about the accent anymore, you will have the time. So, you guys have any questions about that? How to practice acquired accents, how to start acquiring one? This is what we're gonna hit the ground running with once we start seeing each other in person. So, para sulit yung time. Para sulit yung time. Right? So guys, yeah, the production that also includes the timbre, the duration, but these are features that can be dealt with without the hyper definition, without the hyper descriptors. Because the easier it is your ear receives it, the faster it will happen. We can talk about pitch then, we can talk about timbre, quality, which is this, like call center English. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, right? Because that's what it sounds like, call center. Call center. They don't say call center. If I were to say it without reading, I'll just say call center. Call, and then the N is what gets the apostrophe. Call. If I IPA it, it's K schwa L, the apostrophe, S N apostrophe R schwa center, But you know what? I'm not gonna even bother bogging you guys down with IPA. Worse. Yeah. Di ba nga, here in the Philippines, when people try to describe American English, it's like, oh, islang na islang naman. Nag-nosebleed ako, islang na islang. Slang is actually not the correct term. Slang means street vernacular. Legato is the more correct term. Connected is the more correct term. You know? So when you hear descriptors that are slang, that's just a colonist appropriated word. It's really not slang English, because if I said slang English, we have to ask our 13-year-old to step out of the room. Slang is street vernacular. That's what it means. The language spoken on the street. Okay, a word choice spoken on the street, a descriptor spoken on the street. It doesn't mean connected English. And actually, for your ears, contrary to popular belief, what makes English, quote unquote, in Filipino definition, slangy is because we speak with a lot of diphthongs. We speak with a lot of blended letters. If I use a British accent, you'll have truncated letters, meaning cut letters, but the vowels are round. They're rounder. Question, guys? Question, anything? Anything you're curious about? This is really all it is. The rest of the in-person is just delving into all of this. It's like, oh, I'm having a problem with letter R's, or like hindi ko makalas yung itong yung accent na galing sa probinsya namin. That kind of stuff. It's really just that kind of
I
core
was
word.
about to like say something about ours nga eh. Like
Yeah, go.
yeah, something about ours. Kasi I do remember like back when I was a kid, like sa nung LM. Like hindi talaga ako mapaano. Like I can't roll my R's. Apparently yung R's ko daw is like parang I don't know. I probably I adopted it from the media that I've consumed like over the years. Since I don't know, probably from Western media. So like probably yung na-adopt ko na R, the kind of R would be American or
Well, I can hear it.
British, diba? Diba?
I can hear I
So
can
like
hear the
parang
R. Yeah.
so
Mm-hmm.
dito ako nagkakaroon ng problem. Paano ako work with Filipino stuff, with Filipino na content if my R's are like this? I don't even know how it sounds, like how to produce like the thrilled na Filipino
You're
R or
looking for the
something.
rolled R,
Kasi
right?
parang
Are you looking for the rolled R?
yeah, the rolled R, like how exactly do you do
Yeah.
it?
The rolled R has to do with the looseness of your tongue.
Ah,
Yeah, because when I'm
I
listening,
usually like fall back doon sa non-rhotic na na R.
yeah,
It's like,
when I'm listening to you, your R's roll back into your
ah,
throat. It's basically like an
aw,
eaten R, the old way of describing it.
aw,
It's a rolled R, and then there's an over articulation at the end, R, right?
R. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like
which in Mandarin is number
somewhere.
2. So,
Mhm.
you
So I'm
know,
like,
yeah,
how do I navigate that?
If I were to IPA your R, it's definitely an A with a schwa at the end. It's not the R
R,
symbol. It's an A with a schwa.
R,
Because of that back roll of your R. I can hear it because when you say R,
R.
I can
I
that
can't do the
glottal
tongue
touch.
thing
That's
that
what
they usually do, like parang alalala, something like that. Sabi nila, parang start daw with rararara, rarara, rarara. I mean, I can kind of do it in like short
Yeah.
bursts, but then I can't sustain it. That's the thing.
Sometimes that's physicality. That's sometimes physicality. Feel
Mm-mm.
for your tongue. What does your tongue feel like? And then slowly,
Lalalala.
slowly work that erotic R. Lip
The-
trills can
that.
help. Yeah. And we have
Mm-mm.
Don. Don, you also have a question on the thing.
Actually, yung friend, I have a friend din na nabubulol din siya sa CH tsaka SH pronunciation.
Oh.
Like church,
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah, especially H,
Yeah. We'll bridge that. But let's go back and answer this one about the neutralization. So, Alan, what we talked about earlier in terms of neutralization, I'm kind of reframing that word because what are you neutralizing? You're neutralizing the English that's used here in the Philippines. Well, we speak English like this. It's completely different already. So if you neutralize it, the neutral English here in the Philippines sounds like this, because that is Filipino English. So I'm realigning the word neutralize to actually adopting the new accent. So you're either going to speak like this or you're going to speak like this. Gawin na natin siya separate so that when you listen to it, you're not coming from a process of overcorrection or corrective. You're acquiring a set of speech sounds. It's easier to acquire than it is to overwork and overcorrect something that's natively in you. Just treat English from the US, whatever region you're studying, as its own accent. So that whole neutralization thing, that the reason why it hasn't been mentioned is because I'm realigning the neutralization. You're not really neutralizing anything because neutral here in the Philippines nga is like this. Ganito yung English natin eh. So this is neutral for here. But if you want the peg of what Filipinos think neutral English is, well, you have a whole country to choose from. You know, Because really what you're looking for is non-regional American accent. If you really want to be specific, Alan, non-regional American accent. Why? Because when you travel from New York to LA, you will run into accent differences, right? And you can tell by the movies, the American movies that come out, the American material that comes out. And then, yes, wait, Luis, I'll get to you. And then Don, we have the CH and the SH, right? Those two are globally interchangeable, right? Kaya siya nasa ear ng tao, right? Kaya yung iba nabubulol. And yeah, maybe they might not have the exposure, but to bridge the globality of that diphthong, the CH, in French, it's a sh sound, Cherbourg, Chambord, Charlemagne, right? In Italy, you have a difference. It's either a hard K sound, right? Because the ch sound is pronounced by putting two C's, you know. Um, it depends on what the vowel is like before. In Italy, the CH sound is a whole nother thing, you know. Portuguese, whether it's from Portugal or Brazil, that CH sound, a whole nother thing, you know. I'm not even gonna bring in America because English is a blended language. It has Romance features and Germanic features, you know. Um, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. If you're done, clarify that other question if it's about pitch or not, and ask it to me again. Luis, you had your
Oh
hand.
yeah, no, it's just when you mentioned not non-regional American accent, because
Yeah.
that's really, I think, this is what I okay. Giselle knows we're in similar boats. Giselle knows that I've been racking my brain wondering where, how to describe my accent because according to my wife, who grew up in international schools, I don't quite have an American accent, and I
Uh-huh.
think I wouldn't fool someone into believe a typical American into believing that I've lived there all my life. I think some people I've sort of described it this way that someone might believe I've been in the U.S. for
Mhm.
maybe a few years, but I'm an immigrant. But I'm trying to figure out
Mhm.
how to you know, um, find that. How do I sound like I'm a native, not Native American, but you know, um,
Like
like I've
uh
really lived it.
uh
I'm a native to the mainland.
like an
Yeah, then
authentic, yeah, an
yeah.
authentic American sound. Very interesting. Very interesting because to me, you sound like you come from the West. You sound like you come from California. And that's because of how international
That,
schools are taught here.
okay.
Yeah, even the way you pause, where you stop your sentences, where you stop your thoughts, so California, you know?
Okay, now I'm confused.
Yeah, right. Because if you're speaking about accent, meaning the clarity of the
Mhm.
letters, right? It is more non-regional. But because your speech has a
Yeah.
shape. Speech has a shape. Your speech is very Californian because that's the English that's closest to
Oh
us.
my God.
And very, very few from the DC area, the New York area, the Boston area, those Filipinos are so far away from here. It takes me almost 20 hours to fly here direct, you know? And if I think about it, apart from Lea
Uh-huh.
Salonga, no no functionally active artist, whether VO or otherwise, have come directly from that part of the country and come all the way back and was able to bridge another sound of English. California, a lot. Why? Because panahon pa ni Alma Moreno, doon pumupunta yung mga artista. So pag bumabalik sila, doon ang gagaling yung English. You know? Also Vancouver,
Okay.
Oregon, yeah, all of those, all the English in the West, that's what it feels like. That's what it sounds like to me. You know, you don't speak slow, definitely, clearly. You do not speak slow, but it's where you stop your thoughts. That's the
I
feature that jumped out at me at the most.
I need to
Yes,
geek out on this.
you do speak out, you do have some non-regional features, right? But it's a blend. I can hear the Filipino and then I can hear the non-regional, but the whole accent altogether is very Californian. Torrance, if you want me to specify.
Whoa, that's specific.
Oh yes, yeah, Torrance.
I
Torrance goes down to San Diego. Yeah. Listen, you know what you do? You if you really wanna challenge yourself, Luis, in terms of like your ear and like
Mhm.
questions about how your English is, listen to Filipinos from LA. And then listen like then listen to American Asian Americans that have done work in the East. Ming Na Wen,
Yeah,
Sandra Oh, right? Their English is different from the people that come from California.
very, very different.
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
hear the difference, and I can hear it, but for some reason I feel like I can't replicate it. I guess that's where
I understand what you're asking. It's like the production of it. Once you hear it, how to make it happen here in the front,
Mhm.
how to make it come out, right?
And that's gonna be
Um,
faster than fast, I bet.
well, you can specify the way you're hearing by listening to one feature at a time. Let's say listen to the melody first, right? How does it
Okay.
sound? How does the melody of the speech sound? Because a lot of accent rides on melody, right? And
Yeah.
then after that, it's the articulation that gives us the letter positions, right? So what articulations can you hear first, and then what articulations are challenging, a little more difficult, a little more challenging. And then you go to your mechanism, right? And then you start to practice those specific things. Even if you have to think just sound like kanina, di ba? You know, that whole thing where I did like do 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 do
Yeah.
do 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 do. Yeah, you do it on whatever articulation you want, doo-doos, ah-ahs, la-las, you know, hum it, just to separate that feature. And then and only do this to the ones that you hear, huh? Don't force yourself to like pick up something that's like ridiculously buried in the sound. Just the stuff that you hear first, because then the things will follow after that. Then you can regionalize it, then you can localize it. You know. Does that help? I hope.
Yeah, it's giving me a new frame of reference, how to understand what it, I basically try to figure out where, what I'm having trouble with, what I'm hearing, there's
Yes.
that disconnect right now, and
Good.
I've got
Okay.
gears turning in my head now.
Thanks for mentioning that, because I'm going to give you one big thing you can really anchor on: vowels. Listen to the vowel variation, you know, because
Wow.
you're speaking to me, right? You know, you're trying to figure out, you're trying to think, you know, you're trying to help your mechanism understand what to
Yeah.
do. But if I say it to you the way I normally say, I don't say think, I say think. Short, not think. It's a little too bright. The sound's a little too bright, right?
Yeah.
And instead of now, I say now. I touch on the vowel. I don't dwell on the vowel and turn it into a diphthong. Now. It's wider. Tapos may hook pa na W sa dulo. Now. Right? And
Yeah.
that comes from the generations of how English is taught here, right? Kasi gusto natin yung kabit-kabit yung English, it sounds American. So then we start over dwelling on the diphthong. When really, all you need is a clean vowel.
Yeah.
Nice, tall vowel, right? Now, notice I don't say vowel. Kahit na V-O-W-E-L siya. It's not vowel, it's vowel. You know, V-O apostrophe L, vowel, right?
Yeah.
That's what makes, in terms of working on a non-regional American sound, everything that we talked about, those one, two, three, picking up those features and the regionality, Then you start applying it to your vowels. Once your vowels straighten out, your mechanism, you can slowly engage your mechanism. Contrasting. If I were to speak, like when I used to live, if I spoke like this, right? All of this is much taller and it's rounder and it's more forward than the American that I've been using up to now. Now, even though when I talk like this, the first thing that comes out is not received pronunciation. This is just completely Australian, English. It's a British accent right on the Thames, right on the river. But you can hear the sound. The vowels are all out here, o, ah, e, e, ah, o, u, right? It's all forward, right? And you can tell that it changes my voice because the resonating space for this kind of accent is different. Notice that out of all this, we've been speaking for about a good we started at 9. I haven't yet used the word placement in terms of direction. I haven't used the word position, right? Because these sounds, these melodies, they all place in a space. And that space changes depending on what you're experimenting on, what you're studying, what you want to clean up, what you want to learn. Yeah. So that, and I don't have to do anything. I don't have to think, oh, I'm speaking American, I'm speaking British. No. The mechanism is there. So I just keep my thoughts going forward. But I know that when I shift sound, shift accent, the behaviors follow along. How does that help with your question? It's the vowels. You can bridge everything into lining up those vowels. I hope that helps.
It does.
Yeah.
It's gonna keep me awake for a while.
Oh, you know what? That's the I mean, come on. You'd be surprised as to how this is all gonna work in because now it's in your head. Because
Yeah.
one time you might not be the one driving, you're commuting, or let's say, you're traveling, tas bigla na lang, you're just by yourself, you go, oh, or you're testing the positions in your body, right? That happens. That's what makes any person in the performance world a little special. Because may sarili tayong mundo, we might as well embrace it
Yeah.
and use it fully, you know. May sarili tayong mundo, and people, we aren't the ones going into their spaces, they're the ones coming into our space, you know.
Yeah.
So,
Totoo yan.
yeah, right. And then just and this is for everybody, give yourself the ownership to know your voice is part of you. It is yours. So that means the world that your voice lives in is a world for you. It is yours. This is not something that anyone should throw at you because you come with your voice. It is your voice. It is not a peg. It is not a criteria. It is not a description written on paper or sent through an email. This is part of you. So Francel knows this because she's in Western music. Embrace it, enjoy it, and give yourself the opportunity to enjoy it for you. Acquire and work on these things for you. Don't do it because this person might want it from you, that assignment might want it from you, this job might want it from you. You're going to surprise them. You will, and I believe that for all of you. Because this is part of, as an instrument, what makes the voice unique is hindi siya pwedeng kapitan. Because nakakapit siya sa atin. It is in our bodies. It's not like a piano, And it's what makes this kind of study very difficult. And applause to you guys for wanting to be curious enough. Kasi hindi yung katulad dito na sasabihin, madali lang yan, voice lang yan. Oh, no. Sige nga, try mo. So don't None of that, minimizing talk for you guys, because you guys are maximized. I am maximizing you in terms of, and this is not a permission. I'm acknowledging that you guys, your voices are just as your own as the beautiful faces that I see. That's how it is for me. I also have a different mentality. I come from a different working environment, but I want to bring that here for you guys. If I am just an example of it, and then take what you get and go with it, good enough for me. Because it is your voice, it is your mechanism. So I don't need to use position. I don't need to use copy this, copy that, the traditional way of learning, because once you feel it, then you know. You guys, when you start practicing accents, that's you sounding like that accent, not that accent sounding like you. It's you with that accent. You own it. If Don starts to speak with a British accent and starts studying a variation of it, like, a Welsh accent, that's Don's voice with a British accent and a Welsh accent. Not somebody who says, oh, speak it this way, speak it that way. No. It's yours. Once you acquire these things, they're there forever. Just keep practicing, keep using them. Even if it annoys your family members or your housemates, just keep doing it. You guys don't know how many times my brother and sister have done this to me. It's like, we get it, you can do it, we got it. But they don't understand that it's the repetition that keeps it the way it is, Anyway, at least it's better than my parents. My parents react to me this way. Mom, do you mind if I ask for some money? I'd like to grab a snack. Daddy, are we going to go to the grocery today? I love them. But they're just like, I can't believe you came out of my vagina. Dad, are we going out? My dad's like, I wasted a sperm on you. Mom, I'm going to go golfing, okay? I hope that's useful, everybody. With all the craziness. By the way, this is what you get. Doesn't matter if we're on Zoom. If I see you guys in the next few Sundays, this is what you'll get. Thoughts, questions?
Don,
Yeah.
your question about the dynamics, whatever.
Yeah, the dynamics question.
Yeah, still hasn't been addressed.
Only because I'm curious too. I'm like, oh, what's
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Big
I think
words.
I'm interesting without the dynamics for whether you're the loud or the soft. They still can make it
Yes.
yeah,
Okay. So that kind, right? That has to do with air compression. Because if you start fiddling with your mechanism and you just don't relax it, that's how you get tired quickly. We've all experienced that whole thing where we're being asked more presence with the voice, more presence, or more this, more that. And then our natural reactive response is to speak louder. And we tend to speak from here. We forget to take a breath. What creates presence in the voice is not so much how much you work your throat, but it's how properly compressed your air is, how much air you've taken in. Because remember, it's air that supports the sound. You need that air to pass through your vocal cords at optimal rate so that the vibrations are... Actually, you can see this with singers. Those singers who have very nice vibratos, very even,
yes.
no double pitching, and
Yes.
and they don't go straight and then vibrato, like there's vibrato on every note, right?
Yes.
Vibrato, contrary to what we normally are taught in school when we're younger, right?
Yeah.
It is not an effect. It
I-
is It is a physicality of a concept of physics
Yes, yes.
happening in the vocal
Yeah.
cords. And it is because sound travels in waves and it is measured as a wave. When your vocal cords are relaxed and float, I call it floating because it's, I imagine a jellyfish, like the legs of the jellyfish is just going like this,
Yeah.
soft and pliable.
Uh,
When your voice is like that, once you send the correct pressure of air
yes.
and you want to grow the sound, it's just controlling the air pressure. It's very diaphragmatic that way.
Mm-mm-mm.
The vibrato will happen because your vocal cords are so relaxed, it oscillates. And
Yes.
oscillation is related to sound in terms of physics, right?
Yes, yes,
Diba?
yes.
It's that analogy of when you stretch a rubber band, pag ginanon mo siya, nagva-vibrate pa siya kahit nakatigil na.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. Yeah.
Don, that question is that oscillation. The best way to create quote unquote frequency with your sound, volume
Mm-mm-mm.
if you want, is to release the vocal cords and pay attention to the air pressure. Because once that air pressure hits a sweet spot, modulating, creating size, changing pitch, it's all on the air. Which means if you need to lay out a lot of work or if you're doing radio work and it's like your slot is like 11:30 to 4 or 3 a.m., diba? And you're not used to it, you have to get used to the shift in your hours, your body's not done yet. That taking a breath. It's actually what I'm doing this entire time I'm speaking to you guys. That's why my voice isn't getting tired because every thought is a breath. I
Okay.
load up again and then I go. I load up again and then I go. And I don't start from zero. When I take in my breath to speech, it's just like when I do it for singing. I only take in just enough breath that I need. I take in my full breath to activate the support. And then as I'm speaking, I only replace whatever air gets used for speaking. I don't start from ground zero where I have to nagko-collapse yung katawan ko, then I have to expand it again. No, no. And that, Dawn, in terms of your question, yung ano niya, the mechanism gets used to it. It's like the athletic part of working with the voice. And then it becomes second nature. It's like how swimmers learn a stroke, and then all of a sudden that stroke becomes mechanical.
Yeah.
You will build up the muscle memory for it. And
Yeah, I do
for
this in my choir during the time when I rehearse. I'm also a choir member, by the way, and I'm also a singer. Yeah,
Oh,
I just want
good,
to.
good, good.
Yeah.
So a lot of this is bridging from two
Yeah,
ends for you.
even the opera, the
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
classical music. Yeah, it's
yeah.
one of the hardest thing that I had there, and I've learned something like one of my favorite classical artists, Mario
Mhm.
Lanza, or yeah, Luciano
Oh,
Pavarotti.
hey.
Yeah, Mario Lanza, tenor. Yeah, one of the other. And I studied in
Yeah.
the College of Music in UST. Yeah, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
For me, my voice family is Jonas Kaufman. I can relate to his voice.
Yeah, yes. Jonas Kaufman. Yeah.
But you're correct. You're correct. Um, that whole the frequency thing, go back to your breath training.
Yeah. Yes.
This is for everybody, by the way. Luis, also this hooks into
Breathing
your
exercise.
what can I do to clean up sound, to clean up my non-regional English. There's a pacing to the breathing.
Yes.
Yeah. There's a pacing to the breathing.
Even the humming, I guess. That's a
Yes,
part of
yes, yes.
humming. Yeah.
Yeah.
The-
Bridging this back to like the speech stuff, hum the melodies of the stuff that you guys are wanting to work on.
Mm-mm.
I know it's hard because we hear them as words first, but hum the melodies because it's there. It's hard training because we don't think that way on an everyday basis. Anything else, guys? Good. Don, did I help you with your question? I hope I did.
Yeah, thank you very much for the learning and thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And by the way, you know this already. It's just just putting it together in a different way.
Yeah.
You guys know this already. Any other questions? We have a few more minutes. Few questions? Anybody wondering about other parts of the voice? Like, ooh, how do opera singers do that without a mic? Or why do Broadway singers sounds the way they do? Or you know, how do we get that crispness without losing the bass when we're reading?
Does that affect on the warm or cold water before you start then reading the
Ah,
scripts? Yeah,
good question. Good
yeah.
question. That is as individual as your body. That is as individual as your body. For example, with me, the whole tepid water, cold water, hot water, lemon, honey, garlic, whatever. I do that stuff when I'm sick, but to me, it doesn't matter what water I bring with me, it doesn't affect my voice. But if you give me dessert, if you give me chocolate, if you give me ice cream, anything milk based, if you don't make Dan sleep and you ask him to go out and go dancing and have karaoke and have fun the night before, done. Done, 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 done. Nothing. And it's because of the size and the weight of my voice. I might sound like a voice that's very like, you can throw that voice around, blah, blah, blah. Yes, you can, but it has to be taken care of before it can. Even when I speak, even when I speak. That's why when you guys hear me talk, it sounds like there are pockets where my voice hits this resonance. It's because I can tell when my throat is rising. And so, I just, open up the space in the back of my throat more and it pushes the sound forward, you know. I call it my whale voice because it's like, you know. That's actually what my sister says when I used to warm up on Sunday morning in the shower. And they're like, Dad, the humpback is in the shower again.
How many minutes do you train before you start to read? How many
Actually,
minutes?
after all, so from school, I thought you had to be like, oh, okay, practice. Here's your
Yeah,
vocal exercise.
okay.
Sometimes nowadays, after school, now that I'm older, sometimes all I need to do is a lip trill and I'm ready to
Ah,
go.
yeah, yeah. Lip trill.
I do a lip trill with a slide, like,
Yeah, yes, yes.
as long as I keep my throat
Uh,
open, I do that a couple of times and take breaths, I'm good to go.
from down to up,
Um,
yun yung lip trill.
I do it from the top to the bottom
From
right
top to
away
the,
because
yeah,
yeah, because for
top to
my
bottom.
voice, if I go from the bottom to the top, once I get to my passaggio, problems. So I start
Yeah.
above my passaggio and go down
Uh,
so that everything is open all the way through.
yeah.
Yeah. So again, like that kind of stuff, just pay attention to your body, guys. Pay attention to your body. You know, I I notice changes when I work out for a role. Like, say, if a specific role asks me to be a little bit smaller, my breathing has to adapt to the lack of weight because the feedback of my expansion changes. There's less around me, right? Because if you have, let's say, if you have I'm going to say the scientific term so we don't offend anybody. Interstitial adipose, basically fat pockets. So if you're carrying a little bit of weight and you're breathing out, your mechanism feels different. When you lose all of that, when you gain muscle, any kind of adjustment that affects your core, there's a point of slight adjustment when it comes to your breathing. Because if you get smaller, there's less around you. So your muscles don't have to work as hard, right? If there's more around you, that extra weight can sometimes translate to better feedback because you can feel your body pushing against it, you know? Well, I mean, like, hey, I'm not saying wear Christmas and New Year along with Easter and Fiesta, because then that's just not healthy, you know? But your body, just pay attention to it. Pay attention to your diet, pay attention to your hydration, very important. Because it's constantly hot here and humid here in the Philippines, you will deal with a lot of dehydration very quickly, especially because if you work in if you are put in an air conditioned environment, our AC here is much, much stronger. The average air conditioning temperature in the United States is 72 degrees. No, no, no. The average temperature over there is like 69 in Fahrenheit, 69 degrees. Over here in the Philippines, 72 degrees, malamig na. Kasi it's 90 outside, you know? And that affects the humidity. That affects the quality of the air that you're inhaling. I have trouble when it's cold and humid. Yung mahamog, like early morning air, I have trouble. There's so much moisture in the air, it's gonna induce exercise, and it's gonna turn on exercise-induced asthma, even though I'm not doing anything. It's just because of the amount of liquid in the air, right? If there's 100% humidity and it's cold, to me, it's like drowning. It feels like I'm in the water in the swimming pool, submerged up to my nose. You know, pay attention to those things with your instruments. You know, they're all good points of information. Teaches you about how your body reacts to your voice. Very important. Oh yeah, yeah, correct, Jan. Yeah, lost weight from TV. Um, if you are very, Alan, if you're very sensitive to how your body changes and how your voice works, sometimes it can. Illness is also a something that can affect the voice. You know, because again, the mechanism is so small. You know, it's so small. You know, in terms of lung capacity, humid air, yeah, relate, Jan, relate. Because when I moved from the US to the Philippines, my asthma stopped, but then I found out it didn't stop, it just adjusted. My enemy is cold, humid air. And it makes me cough, like gasp, you know. So I got used to like putting the AC to like dehumidify slightly, but not cold air, just slightly cold, you know. Any other questions, guys? We have 2 minutes. Yeah.
Anymore? Like, how is the workshop gonna happen? Whatever.
Any questions about the work? So this is basically,
Yeah.
you know, the general framework of it, and the rest is just specificity, and half of it is the stuff that you guys bring in. You know. We also get, I mean, when we see each other in person, we have to talk about positioning with the body, you know, making sure that when you speak, you don't tilt your head forward and down, because then it'll send it right on top of your speaking mechanism. You know, that's why there's this thing of like shoulders rolled back, chest open, spine straight, because it opens up, you know, more advantage for your mechanism.
I want to ask for everyone's benefit. I mean, when is this happening? Exactly. Schedule,
Oh yeah,
pricing.
Giselle.
Oh, yeah. Can you stop shouting that?
Yes, I can. Thanks, guys. There goes the share. If you need anything of that, you'll see it again.
Yan. Yes, yeah. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
Chinese school here. Okay. So here is my Canvas slide. So sorry, Louise, it's a little far from you. It's June 25 to July 16. It's Tomas Morato. So up to you guys. But people up north, good. You're in luck.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
You know what, guys, actually,
yeah.
if you guys really want to come, and the you know, I mean, I hope there's internet there, because we can always stream.
Yeah, we can maybe. We can stream it.
Yeah, we can always stream.
Ooh.
But the nice thing with the physicality is you guys can see it in my body, I can show it in your body, and also preemptively already, right? Voice work, you're allowed to touch me in, like, you know, proper places if you need to understand how the body moves, because that's how I teach it in studio anyway. Because sometimes you're not sure what you're looking at, and you're not sure what you're looking for. So in order to bridge that, you know, I always I always wear a belt just so you can, you know, I've had students squeeze me with belts, squeeze me with their arms just to see what happens with that straw breath, with that pressurized, inhale. Okay. And also positioning, releasing the jaw, just so you know that, this is why the in-person stuff, it might actually benefit some of your questions because you'll see the physicalization of it and you'll hear it. You'll hear it in ambient space. So that's the info. Any other
Yes.
questions? guys?
And then uh actually I've done the logistics of it, like
Yeah, just pop them onto
oh yeah,
regular
just
interface. Let's do that.
so of course the concern is always budget. Okay. So it has a flexible plan of like you can pay in installments, just 2.5 to secure the spot. Then you can pay next month, whatever gets talk to me. Yeah, that's it.
There's a question in the chat.
Is there?
How much is the reg?
Yes. So in total, it's 10, but it's 2.5 for securing the spot. So that's it. And you can attend whenever you can. Some people approach me that I can't attend any all of the Sundays, so you can pay whatever day you are able to attend. Bayad na yung venue, guys, so wala na akong magagawa. So yeah. Yeah.
And again, like collect if you feel like you're going to be able to make it to at least one, collect your questions because
Yes.
there's a lot of this that will repeat again depending on the specificity of what we're dealing with. Because again, once you guys see it physically, it's very easy to bridge the biology. That it'll take like 10 minutes, less than, and then engage. And then the rest is just like, oh yeah, like Luis's question, like Jan's question. Oh, how is this? How is
Yes.
that? Francel.
Yes, Francel.
Hi, I hope my fan is not being too noisy.
No, Zoom is
no.
doing its job.
Nice, love it, Zoom. So I think my question is, are when we enter to this class, should we like choose like a specific accent that we want to work on? Would that be helpful, or
It's really that flexible. If you want to work on something or you have a curiosity about something, you can bring it in. Or if you want to use the time to start something and ask your questions about how to start a new accent acquisition, you can do that too. Again, the reason being is because this information will transfer anyway. It will keep coming along because this, as we're answering questions about, oh, okay, if I'm working on the British accent, we will still touch on the same technicalities that can help through that.
yeah, that would be
Yeah, does that answer?
that would be great. Yeah, and just like for me, I guess like as an actor, sometimes there's a part of me that also gets like how do you say this, like I get oh my gosh, I lost the word, pero parang I get conscious yun. I get conscious about how
okay.
I'm speaking like a monologue or a dialogue both in English and Filipino, and it would be so nice to like, how do I get out of that, how do I get out of my head?
We'll be addressing, we'll be talking about that too. And just so you have something to hang on to, the more you're able to keep yourself in a moment where you are speaking as yourself, self meaning the character, as you, because we loan ourselves to the character, right?
Yeah.
The character is not away from us. We share our bodies with the character, right? We share our minds, our hearts, and all that stuff, right? If you take it from that moment, owning the moment that you are speaking as this individual, in this individual's voice, right? However that comes out, if the behavior is there, you can have people hear past how you sound. The features of the speech will no longer matter because they understand. They're gonna get the keys to Brgy understanding. So just ground the moment in what is it I'm trying to say? What am I, you know, very Meisner this way, Francel.
Yeah, the behavior.
Sorry, I found a clip of Dan being touched in class, trying to figure out where the breathing is happening.
Yeah, yeah.
So yes, yeah. So here it is.
Yeah, because sometimes it's very, very deep, you know, and there's a certain tension that you get with diaphragmatic breathing that is felt one way but often described another, and they don't coincide, you know, because the idea of the body expanding as a full oval, you know, is hard to bridge. And when your diaphragm descends, that's actually what happens. It's not just your diaphragm that's moving, it's your intercostal muscles, your false ribs, your whole core is expanding because your lungs are filling up with air. And your diaphragm is moving downward and it's pushing all of your lower organs all over the place, you know? So Francel, I hope that the previous response helps you approach your question.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dan.
You're welcome. Anything else, guys?
Any more?
We do hope we get to work with you because
Yes.
again, it's great over Zoom, but when you get the physicality of it, you can really hear it. And you can really see the action of what's happening. You know, and it says 4, you know, the fourth one is just kind of like, you know, if there's something that really needs to get pushed, you know. So really, again, if you can only go certain times, you know, it's fine. You know. Yeah, anything
Yeah,
else?
you can always message me if like there's other concerns or anything.
Yeah, anything, I mean, I hope you guys found something again useful in what I've talked about, and I hope that it opens up your mind to thinking, oh yes, I do know this. It's just in a different way, you know, because that's important. You know, we don't, you know, again, this is not like a right or wrong thing. Question.
Last minute.
Thank you guys. Before anything else, thank you guys for spending your morning with us.
Good morning to you.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Giselle.
Welcome.
Thanks.
Just keep practicing, guys,
Thanks,
and
Giselle.
play. Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing
Just
wrong with
play.
playing. I play
Yeah.
all the time.
Play, discover, explore. Use your recorders. Because our bodies are oriented to pick up sound coming at us, not sound coming out of us, right? And again, it's just biology because our voices are in our bodies. We feel the vibrations before we hear an accurate rendition of the sound. So don't be afraid of your recorders. You know, don't be afraid of your recorders because it will help you. You know, and no judgment when you're listening to yourself. Remember, it's not why do I sound like this? It's what is showing up in my voice? What do I need to approach this? What is causing X, Y, and Z? What else can I, you know, no why questions. Why questions can shut down your learning very quickly. Yeah. And also take breaks, guys, please. If you're already like, oh, this is going nowhere, go ahead. Turn everything off.
Bringing sass.
self-judgment versus
Bringing
self. I mean, like
sass.
the quintessential struggle of people in the arts and creative industries: self-judgment versus self-assessment. You know, and don't forget to take breaks. It's healthy. You're more productive giving your mind room than you are beating it down. You know, you can only beat your brain down so far until it just stops becoming productive, and then it will physicalize. Then your adrenal glands will turn on. Then all of a sudden your cortisol is going to shoot up. And then you're going to need your dose hormones to turn on, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and, endorphins. And a nice balance of that is widely productive. You guys know about that, right? The dose hormones. Yeah. I call them dose because I just arranged it that way when I was, finishing my master's in artist mental health. So.
Yeah, he's an artist mental health coordinator.
I needed to do something during the pandemic when all of New York was closed. So,
So anyway, I think it's a good time because you are going to the south, Dan.
I am very far south. How is it really smart, guys, that I'm gonna try to get a grab from Malate to Las Piñas and make it seem like I just got there? Okay.
Makati to Las Piñas?
From Malate to Las Piñas.
Malate.
Oh,
Malate.
why not the bus? Taking a bus to Las Piñas might be more doable because like a lot of buses going that way.
Yeah, right. Like they still have that same route where you just like hop on one or two and then you just go down there,
Yeah,
right?
South Mall, for example. South Mall, like from Taft, I guess. A bus on Taft to South Mall.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you can
because like I was
ride
gonna
the-
go to,
Mhm.
I was gonna do the
Carousel.
Robinsons thing because it's just across from me over there. But then like, yeah, maybe Taft might be better.
Yeah.
I'll
Okay, it's
figure
time
it
to stop recording.